Hello, and this is the Line Go Show with your host, SirStrife, and my co-host this time is Apologist.
Hey, how you doing?
Would you introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. I go by Apologist. I've just kind of come into this bigger theist-atheist debate. Pretty much I have a YouTube channel. If you just look up Apologist on YouTube, that's where my stuff is. I also have a blog at counterapologist.blogspot.com.
And what would you say is the, would you want to introduce the topic?
Sure. So the topic today is we're going to be covering apologetic arguments. At least hopefully we'll start out with the normal 5 arguments that you get in natural theology, and we'll see where we go from there, I think.
Okay, but also to note, this show also promotes lesser channels, in a sense. And this week we'll be promoting Packard Pokesat, if I get that correct. And Packard will be joining us right now as well. Packard? Oh, give him a second.
Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
Would you like to introduce yourself and
Sure.
Your show?
Yeah, my name is Packard Sonic. I run the Packard Pokesat podcast, and we also have the podcast on Mixler and Stitcher and everywhere else. So
You've got mail.
Oh, sorry about that. No, I don't have mail. Be quiet.
That's AOL.
Well, it's actually just the AOL sound. It's an old song that I kind of grew up with, so I kind of like to put it in there just for shits and giggles.
Okay, so what argument would you want to start with, counter-apologist?
Let's go with, I guess, first cause. That's like the one that my longest video series was on. It's basically the cosmological argument, if you've ever heard of anything like that. So there's a bunch of variants. There's the kalam argument. There's the cosmological argument from contingency. So if you go and watch like debates from like William Lane Craig or a bunch of other apologists, anytime they ask the question, why is there something rather than nothing, or if they try to argue that the past is finite, you don't have an infinite, time doesn't extend infinitely into the past, so they try to use cause and effect or contingency to try and say that there had to be an uncaused cause or a first cause.
A prime mover.
A prime mover, exactly. That would be what I think Thomas Aquinas first made this up.
Aristotle, right?
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It was Aristotle. That was and Aquinas took it from there and tried to make it a little bit different. But yeah, that would be it. So there's a bunch of forms for this argument, and it always comes down to the same problem. When they say why is there something rather than nothing, it'll boil down to, well, they say, well, their God has to be this thing that exists necessarily without a cause, and that it created the material world. And so the immediate response is to say, well, why couldn't we just say that some form of material reality always existed instead of having some supernatural deity do it? And generally that will point that the argument ends in kind of like a stalemate, because the way they get out of their cause having a cause is they basically say God is metaphysically necessary, and metaphysics is a branch of philosophy, and they kind of give some kind of bullshit argument that says why their particular God must be the ultimate necessary anything.
Well, I mean, it seems like to me it's kind of a case of special pleading, isn't it?
It does boil down to that, and the better versions of the cosmological argument are going to really hide how they make that move. Like if you watch William Lane Craig, he's the big apologist that you'll see online because he actually engages in things on the internet. He'll say whatever begins to exist has a cause, and then he says the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. And then from there he says it has to be the Christian God Yahweh.
But the question I would have is, what would be the first cause? Wouldn't that time equal 0? Would that be the moment of first cause?
Well, actually, that's actually a really good point, because when you fight down the kalam argument specifically, it's very related to time itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is you can't have a cause, like if you say like a time equals 0, because he will argue that time is created with the universe. because he wants his God to be timeless. So what happens is he says, how could you create something? How could you create the time itself if the cause has to exist before time? But nothing can exist before the beginning of time. That before and after don't make sense. And so what he does is he says that his God exists timelessly before the universe, and his act of creation is simultaneous with the creation of the universe. So he needs simultaneous causation to actually occur in order for his argument to work. And that's one of the areas where, in my video series, that I kind of try to hammer him on, because it only works under a very specific philosophy of time, is what it's called.
Well, I've heard of something from Craig called simultaneous causation.
Yes, that is a big part of it. So he admits in his published works that the kalam argument is predicated on what's called the A theory, or the tensed theory of time.
Is that the, like, there's two theories of time, A and B.
Correct.
If I remember correctly, wasn't it A was every event exists in a sense, or was that B?
That's B. So what his view of A theory is it's called presentism, which basically means that only the present moment, the objective now, exists. Right? So the past doesn't really exist there's no collection of past moments, really, that actually has like a real status, and the future is the same way. And so the problem with that is that it is most likely the case that the B theory of time is true. And so the B theory of time is what, like, if you ever heard of the space-time continuum, like if you ever watched like Star Trek or physics stuff, well, that's because special relativity and general relativity show that space-time is an entity, like space and time are related in one thing.
Well,
and
that's kind of like the odd thing if you think about it. Time and space. If time was eternal, how can you tell the difference? You can't, can you?
Well, no, there are actually it's kind of an odd situation if you look at the current state in cosmology. Mm-hmm. So we know, basically, science points to space-time being an entity in a four-dimensional manifold / block universe. But we do know that the past is actually finite.
Well, yes.
In terms of our space-time.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that there wasn't some other form of material reality outside of our space-time universe that would have caused ours to come into effect, or is not constantly causing universes to come into existence somewhere in this greater multiverse kind of a thing. So that's one area where what Craig does to get out of the whole A theory of time and special relativity problem is he makes one of the most absurd assertions I've ever actually read. It's one of these things where you see a creationist try to use science, and it doesn't work in a very specific way, so they come up with this absolutely crazy thing. So special relativity will show that his whole the present moment existing thing doesn't actually work because of relativity theory. And what he says is, he goes, well, relativity works, except instead of the four-dimensional space-time interpretation that all of modern cosmology uses, we're use this thing called the Neo-Lorentzian view, which basically means that there's a absolute privileged reference frame in the universe, and it's kind of like a God's eye view.
Are you talking about like absolute time?
Yes.
So you're telling me like there's somewhere in the universe where time began?
Correct.
But that makes no sense because the Big Bang was not a place in the universe.
Well, technically he would argue the Big Bang. He does so many odd things with that stupid argument, but he will basically say that the singularity that he likes to argue from in the Big Bang is equivalent to nothing.
But
and he says
something. It's not nothing.
Well, yeah, that's the whole. If you actually get into the argument and you look at what he did when I made my video series, I hated to have to do it, but the first 11 minutes of it, the first part, is just definitions, because if you look at his how he defines universe, nothing, cause, and the phrase begins to exist, they mean very explicit, specific things that, like, apparently in philosophy you can just do that. You could be like, this phrase means this, this word means this, this word means this.
Would you give us an example?
Sure. So for universe to him means all of material reality. That's it.
Okay.
He doesn't just mean our space-time universe, which is what when you speak to a cosmologist, they would talk about our space-time universe. He doesn't actually acknowledge that we have a space-time. He thinks they're two separate entities. And he basically, if you look at the definition in that way, it's almost special pleading.
It is special pleading.
Pretty much. I mean, I don't know how he doesn't get called on it necessarily more. Or maybe he's got some kind of philosophical wibble to get himself out of it, technically being special pleading. He's actually pretty good at doing that sort of thing.
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt. I actually saw him arguing. I think it was, I forget who it was. It may have been Craig. Not Craig. Hitchens. It was either Hitchens or somebody else, and he was he compared God, so let's say God was a computer, and then they put the God quotation in there, they put a computer into place, and then Craig argued against the fact that the entity, or the God in this case, would be the computer. He argued against that. So he basically took all his own arguments for the God, and he flushed it down the toilet, and as for replace the word God with computer.
Right, and you'll see. I think I might have seen something similar with that. And he basically will say, "Well, you just renamed God the computer. You're just calling God a computer. Then you're arguing the same thing." And I mean, it's a valid counter argument, but he has that. It's like a stupid little out that he can do.
Right,
and he's very good on rhetoric. The guy is just really good on rhetoric. But one of the things that he'll do, so for like the definitions, for like another example, is cause. So for him, he defines cause very generally, where he says it's something that produces an effect.
Wait, doesn't he then say the Big Bang is not an efficient cause?
Well, no, what he does is
something else, I think.
So it kind of comes from this. So what he wants is what's called creation out of nothing, creation ex nihilo. That's a big Christian doctrine that he wants to defend. So what he has to say is he then breaks causation up into two kinds: efficient causes and material causes. So if you're not familiar, an efficient cause is the actor that kind of causes something to happen. So if you have the statue David, the efficient cause would be Michelangelo, and material cause is what it's made out of, which would be like a slab of marble. And so what he tries to argue is that he says when he defines the universe as all of material reality, and he says the universe began to exist, well, you can't have material cause then. And so since he defined cause generally and doesn't explicitly say it needs to be an efficient and a material cause, which is how you could justify that first premise, he says it could be either or. And pretty much he says, well, then therefore there has to be just an efficient cause. And then he kind of goes from there. And the argument almost shifts because once he defines things in that way, he has to prove that all of material reality has an absolute beginning preceded by nothing. And he actually admits that. And the trick there is he actually can't do it. And to catch him admitting that he really can't do it is relatively hard to do, but I have a couple citations from quotes in books where he will admit that it's not absolutely clear. And he says it's implied that the universe has a beginning.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess you could say, the word beginning, when you have no time before, does that even make sense to you, that term?
Not really. It's so...
That's like the thing that I don't get about Craig, is how do you say that there was a beginning before the beginning, in a sense? There was something before...
Right. So, hold on. Let me get my little... I got open up a PowerPoint here where I can show you what the definition. So, here's how he defines begins to exist. All right? This is almost silly. So, something begins to exist... Something E comes into being at T, if and only if E exists at time T. T is the first time at which E exists, which the first two sound, if you look at it, fairly straightforward, okay. Then he adds on 3. There is no state of affairs in the actual world in which E exists timelessly. That's his get-out-of-jail-free card for God. And then he adds, E's existing at T is a tensed fact. So those last two, basically, when he says number 4, is that says if you agree with everything that begins to exist has a cause, when he defines it that way, you agree with his number 4 there that there are tensed facts, which means you subscribe to the A theory of time, which actually brings a whole bunch of other baggage along with it. But that he can resort to kind of cut off your counter replies.
I mean, this might be a little bit off, but to me it sounds like when you say like past tense, things like that.
Right.
It sounds like he doesn't understand scientific uniformitarianism. Just my opinion of it seems.
Yeah, well,
in a sense, because if he says that certain things begin to exist, right?
Right. So
then you can't predict anything from the past from the present. I'm just kind of.
Well, yeah. So what basically his out there is his number 3, where he says something exists timelessly.
Yeah.
And the problem that I think philosophically the biggest thing that hit him on there, which was the second point in the philosophical video I did, which is basically you say, what he ends up happening is he says there can't be an infinite past. He calls it metaphysically absurd. And then he says that you have something timeless being a cause of something else. But the problem is he has to define timelessness in terms of being changelessness. So something can't change. But how does something that can't change affect the change?
Right.
Then it changes.
Right.
Yeah, that changes, right.
Well, what he says is that the universe, he'll say that God doesn't. He said God doesn't change, but the universe changes in relation to God. But effectively, the main problem is that how does something that can't change affect the change? You can't. It doesn't make any sense.
Pretty much, you're saying, how does a God that there was no universe before, that can't change, how does he change from there being no universe to there being a universe?
Right. How does he change? How does he cause a change in the state of affairs? This was something that John Mackey, before he died, when Craig interacted with him way back then, and he said he had brought this objection up, and so Craig's response here is that it's mysterious but not incoherent. So
Craig says it's incoherent.
Yeah.
It's a really easy thing to understand.
If you think about it, though, you say, well, okay, it sounds crazy, but at least it's not a squared circle. Like, it doesn't contradict itself. Like, somehow that wins. Like,
Craig has a squared circle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole thing, is that he doesn't offer but that's buried. How long did it take to get to the explaining that specific point from his little 3-premise syllogism? It's buried. The problem's that his view, the way he's smart. For him, he hides it really well.
Yeah, for him, it's putting on a show. It's like if you go to a magician show, right? He's gonna misdirect you. That's his whole plan. He misdirects you. He flashes all these fancy words and things he knows you're not gonna understand, because the only person they understand to is himself. And so what he does, he's playing this, prestidigitation over here, but don't look at my other hand, because over here, this is where I'm sneaking the handkerchief out. This is what he's doing. This is what people like him do.
Yeah, and just so my background, I was raised evangelical Christian, like hardcore fundamentalist. I went through the Christian schools. I went through Christian high school. I luckily was not in a Christian college, and then I was active in the church for 9 years, I think it was. I was a trustee, everything, and then I finally got out of it. And when I deconverted, my family is still believing, and my wife, most importantly, was. And I tried to go back. And that's when I really found all this apologetics crap. And when you say it's a show, that is so dead on. You have no idea how dead on that is.
You know how it is. For a short time, I was actually involved in the Pentecostal church. So I know the show that they put on. I've seen it firsthand.
Oh yeah. Oh, Pentecostals, they're crazy. They do the tongues. They do everything.
Oh yeah, everything with them. The whole thing. It's theater. It really is. It's just theater.
Well, I mean, you have to admit that these same the kalam is not a new thing, is it?
No.
I think maybe almost a little bit over 1,000.
It's the trick is that he's able to twist bits and pieces of modern cosmology. He cherry picks parts of cosmology that makes it sound like he's right. That's why it had a resurgence back in the 70s when he came out with he came back out with it.
And apologetics, chair picking. Wow, what a concept.
Right, exactly. Like the third video in the series I did on the argument is showing he uses the Big Bang singularity, which most cosmologists will say did not actually exist because there's singularities pop up is a sign that the physics you're using is incomplete, and we know that general relativity is incomplete. It's not technically fully compatible with quantum mechanics yet, and when you get down to the scales below the Planck level, then general relativity breaks down, you see a singularity, and he actually argues that the singularity is literally nothing. That's why you have creation out of nothing.
The thing is, the singularity is just theoretical. I don't think anybody's actually even found one, but theoretically they are possible.
I don't necessarily think that. I mean, most like Hawking and all them will say that there is no such thing as we don't know what's like at the center of like a black hole,
right,
so to speak. But they're pretty sure it's not an actual singularity because, it would be the theory is that it's a boundary to space-time,
right?
But it's not actually a.
Where the big crunch would be at the center of the black hole. We don't know exactly what happens at the center of the black hole, whether it shoots out all the particles at the speed of light at the other side of all the stuff that it's crunched in, or it's just massively compressed.
We do know that it does emit particles, and it's not going into some unknown dimension. It actually shoots it off in a direction that we can actually observe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's how they go away.
Oh, okay.
That's how black holes go away. They eventually will go away. They're constantly shooting out
I do know that I do know that black holes go into feeding cycles. From what I understand, they go into they'll kind of like roam. I don't know. This way it was explained to me that they kind of like roam the universe, as it were, and then they go into these dormant stages where they're still present, but they're not feeding until they get I don't know, hungry, and then
wait. Let's ask our particle physicist here.
Yes,
Chris.
Okay, for one, black holes do not shoot off particles. You're completely wrong on that.
I am? Okay.
Okay, which they are deflected off.
Dormant stage where they're still present.
Can you mute your channel?
So they get.
Can you mute the blog TV?
Hungry, and then.
Did you mute it?
Yep.
He's got it muted now.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought I could have sworn I was. I thought.
No, it actually isn't emitting particles. It's being deflected off of the plane. And yes, we do not know what's at the center of a black hole, but and you're right. We don't think it's a singularity, but we don't think it's a warping of space and time either.
Right.
That's the effect.
Right. Because gravity can warp the space around. Everything basically. Like if you were to put the sun.
At our best guess, it's a high mass object.
I thought it was.
That's our best guess.
Right. Just doing a quick Google on the side. I thought it was Hawking radiation what was supposed to be emitted by the black holes.
Yeah, but in 2002 he came out and said he was wrong. He was incorrect about that model. That model would be based on in another reality. It basically is the way he put it whenever he came out and said I was completely wrong on that. But only in our reality. In another multiverse, it's possible.
Yeah, well, the multiverse has been proven. It's another one of those theories.
Right, exactly.
But I was right about the fact that black holes do have these feeding cycles. I'm not sure what they are because I don't think they're
center of our galaxy. I think it was.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, they go.
Yeah, actually, we have a large one at the center of our own galaxy, which is.
Well, there's one in it, and we think that there's one at the center of almost every galaxy. It's our best prediction.
That's what we're swirling around, basically.
Centaurus, what's it called? It begins with an S. I think the center one is a Centaurus A.
Yeah.
That's the one in our center of our galaxy, Centaurus A. But I mean,
No, thank you for correcting me on that. I remember seeing it on some History Channel like space thing once.
Yeah, probably something
like that.
Or something because that's like old data. A lot of people. Hawkins is great for PR, but he doesn't go around and correct his mistakes, and his mistakes stay out there as actual common knowledge, and which is fine if they were right, but they're not. He's come out and actually said he's wrong. And I think that a lot of people should actually research that stuff and actually come up and say that.
Right. I know he said that same thing about singularities. He did say that he was the first one who came out with the singularity idea, and then he said, I convinced everyone there was a singularity, and I spent the last 10 years trying to convince everybody that there isn't one.
Right.
But wait, Chris. From a scientific physicist point of view, what is the beginning of the universe? For the kalam, in a sense, from your perspective, though.
From my perspective, it's just a rapid expansion of space and time, and that's where the Big Bang started. Is we had a rapid expansion of space and time.
But
and
was there a place in the universe this occurred?
No, it happened everywhere. We don't see an actual point of origin when we look at the universe. So when we're looking at it, it's just a rapid expansion of space and time. And when that happened, it released a lot of energy into the universe too, into that space and time, which gave us the matter that we have right now. That's pretty much the definition of the Big Bang. A lot of people think of it as everything came into existence all at once, and it's just this wave, but it's not. Space and time just pretty much expanded, and everything came into existence from that expansion.
Pretty much space and time had to come before anything else existed.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, our definition of actually space and time got woven together from that expansion. We actually think that time itself might not even be just relative to our space and time. Our space is relative to us, and it can only occur in our universe. But the time, they think, is what we're thinking, is not relative to just our universe.
But how would we know that?
We do studies on it, and we look at black holes, for one, where time gets so distorted that it just moves in a completely different flow from what we see in our everyday universe, where time can move backwards and it can move forwards, and we see that happening in black holes, around black holes, I should say.
So technically, if you could manipulate a black hole, even if that's just science fiction now, you could use it as a time machine.
Well,
in a sense, there was a physicist who, in 2010, who actually came out with a path that if you followed around the black hole, you could actually meet yourself before you actually enter the black hole. But it's this very complicated path.
Isn't that's like the twin paradox kind of an idea?
Yeah,
sort of a thing. Yeah, but you technically, my understanding of it. So please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm an engineer, so my physics is like 10 years ago back in college. So if I'm off, please hit me over the head with a 2x4. But I thought my understanding of it was that it depends on the reference frame, and as of right now, there's no going back in time, but like the faster you go, time dilation, basically what happens.
No, that's the old way we looked at it. Time actually has no set direction that we can tell.
But wait, how could you meet yourself if the material in you, if the matter that makes you up, is what is like? How could there be two?
That's the complicated part of the equation.
How could there be two sets of matter that make you?
Because you move forward in time to move backwards in time.
Yes.
And in physics, there is no actual. A particle can exist in two states at the same time, and it's very possible for you to actually be in two states at the same time. One in the future and one in the past, and one in the present.
But then, what happens if you're both in the present? Because technically, isn't when you meet yourself in the past from the future, you're in the present, both of you?
Well, I think what happens is when you get this close to... you get this... Go ahead.
Go ahead, Counter.
Correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is basically space-time is at this point when you're that close to a black hole, space-time is warping.
Yep.
So you're like, if you were to say go around it fast enough or whatever, I guess in this kind of a path, what happens is that the light that would have been reflecting of where you were when you started will just be getting to where you are when you've moved forward. So to you, time has passed, but from where you started, you've moved basically so fast, and the fabric of space-time is warped around enough so that the light of where you started is just getting to you where you are after you've moved.
So it's
kind of.
So you're
what it actually is saying is that space-time is so warped that your particles can actually be in two different places at once.
But would that be a shadow of you in a sense? Because like
yeah, it would be a shadow of yourself, but you still.
So I was thinking it would be an exact copy of you in a sense. Never mind then. No.
So
pretty much you cannot interact with it. You can't. It's pretty much you're watching yourself do what you did already.
Right.
So it's like a movie. You'd be rewatching what you just did.
Yeah.
Except the weird thing is you'd be third person. You'd be seeing yourself in third person, which is kind of weird.
And you probably wouldn't even realize it's you, because it would be that distorted.
You mean it would be like a
reflection? Are you talking? It would be like saying you're basically saying this would be like a reflection and
it's like a doppelganger. It's not you, but it was you, and it's doing what you did, but it's just
well. You have to keep in mind, it would never actually. I mean, it's all theoretical because if you were able to move at that speed, the photons hitting you when your mass was moving at the speed of light would cause like an atom bomb would go off.
It would rip you apart.
Yeah.
Even in that close to the black hole, would rip you apart.
Yeah.
I mean,
unless you can overcome it.
That's the whole thing about theoretical physics is we can do this in our mind and we can see that that's very possible, and we say us. It's whenever we say that it's possible for you to do it, we're actually talking about it's possible for the particles to go all the way around, and the particles can both be in the present and in the future in the same location at the exact same time. That's what they're actually talking about whenever we talk about that. But we put it in terms of Strife can follow this path around, and Strife can meet himself before he.
But I'm not meeting myself. It's just me watching myself.
Right,
but when you say meet, I'm like, well, does that mean I could actually stop myself from going around the black hole? No, but it's actually like I'm looking at myself doing it, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's not like that's what I first thought you meant by meet.
No.
Because that would then be like the grandfather paradox, in a sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So. I guess kind of bring it back to like the whole kalam. Like the minute you admit there's a 4D space-time, the whole kalam goes out the window. It doesn't work anymore, and Craig admits it. So when he tries to get around it, is he tries to say there's like a special interpretation of special relativity, where that's that privileged reference frame I mentioned before, and so the evidence that we have for special relativity being true is this time dilation effect when you go near the speed of light, and length contraction. And so you can actually find it on his website. There's a link to it in one of my video description boxes.
I'm just curious though, by what he says, like how do you know what the reference point is?
Oh, you can't. Oh, that's the best part. The privileged reference frame in the Neo-Lorentzian interpretation is the official scientific name for it. Is undetectable in principle. You can never, ever have evidence for it.
So it's
God's eye. It's a God's eye view is the way I like to think about it. But here's the best part. Those two pieces of evidence that we've time dilation and length contraction that we've verified a number of different ways. We account for time dilation every day in GPS satellites. On his view, they don't actually occur. They merely look like they occur, and we could never access the reference frame in which they don't actually occur.
What?
Yeah.
So pretty much he's saying, if I was God, it could seem like it's doing this, but actually it's not.
No, so any reference frame that we could ever have, he says time dilation and length contraction is something that messes with our measuring tools. So they look like they occur, but they don't actually occur.
Wait, if they're messing with our measuring tools, don't they mean that they're happening?
Well, it's just a way of our measuring tools being off. So it looks like it happens, but it doesn't actually happen. Which, if you think about it, that could invalidate any... Like, when you have any piece of evidence that contradicts any kind of theory anywhere, you could just use that argument to get around it. Well, it doesn't really happen.
Oops, my atomic clock is wrong.
Right. It's fairly amazing.
Can I interject for a second?
Oh, please, go right ahead.
Can you bring Neil up into the conversations?
Oh, okay, I'll bring him.
Thanks.
Oh yeah, he's a chemist. He'll know more about.
Yeah.
Let's see.
This is stuff me and him actually talk about all the time. So.
There we go.
Let me see if I can.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Neil.
Gonna see if I can find the link to it so I can read you the quote.
Has he been watching the show?
Kind of. Whenever I jumped
I've been
out.
listening.
No.
Yeah, whenever I jumped out, I think he missed part of the combo.
Could an atomic clock be wrong, Neil?
Yes, it can be actually.
Yes.
That's why we keep changing. That's why we keep updating those things all the time.
I meant like what we use.
Yeah.
Well, all the standards we use actually are subject to changes. Like our current understanding of what a meter is, representation of space, is taken directly from a platinum iridium bar that's stored in a special climatized and atmospheric controlled container in France. And this bar actually undergoes changes to its length. It's
Right.
the most stable substance that we can possibly use, and yet it's not static.
Right.
And
That's
and
length
same
contraction,
other-
if I'm not mistaken.
Sorry, what?
Is that length contraction?
Yes.
Well, it contracts and it expands. So
It's
sometimes it's shorter and sometimes it's longer.
That's why we added and subtract minutes and hours or minutes and seconds from each day sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the atomic clock, they had it off of an isotope of cesium-137, measuring the radioactive decay, like the rate of neutron emission. It's pretty accurate. Like, I mean, we're talking on the scale of a fraction of time that we can't perceive over years. This thing is accurate, but it is varying.
Well, but pretty much, would you say that if we used a tool that uses cesium, would
Well, they might be using something else. I don't know what they're using for the atomic clock at the moment, but
well,
I-
as a hypothetical,
sure.
and you know, like we put it in a plane and we put one on the Earth, and we make the plane go at like 7 Gs.
Oh, well, you're talking relativity. That's
Yeah.
different. The clock
that's
might
massive.
measure. The clock might measure different, but in fact, it is still accurate. It's just the actual act of relativity that is altering the measurements that you would take. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, you're
because
talking
speed-
about taking
speed
two
of the particle
clocks,
actually-
synchronizing them, having two synchronized atomic clocks, sticking one on a very fast object that approaches the speed of light, and then seeing if there's a difference. Yes, there will be. If you take two cesium clocks and just put them side by side and wait for them to fall out of sync with each other, you might have to wait over 100,000 years.
But yeah, that's pretty much counter. That's what you said about Craig, right? He said that. Counter.
Sorry. Could you? I was looking at something on the side there. I apologize.
It's all right. We're
Craig
talking
pretty much-
about...
Okay.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, pretty much Counter brought up the point that Craig says that, well, the tool that you're using is wrong. Pretty much, will be wrong.
Correct. I mean, what he'll do is he'll state that in the Neo-Lorentzian interpretation of special relativity, it only appears that length contraction and time dilation occur, and they don't. But in the actual reality of the absolute reference frame that we can never get to, they don't actually happen.
Well,
then
they
it
do
doesn't
happen.
matter if we can never get to it then.
Well,
They do happen, and it's already been proven, and they can look at differences between satellites orbiting the Earth and clocks that are actually on the Earth, and they can see the degree by which they're out. When they launched the global positioning satellites, they also did time experiments, and by having many clocks, they were able to narrow down the margin of perceptual error. Like, they were able to take more accurate measurements, and they've actually proven that time dilation does occur.
oh, he won't even dispute necessarily even that. What he'll state is that it'll look like it happens, and it'll look like it happens consistently as long as you stay measuring within one reference frame. But
So it's a perceptual, it's a positional illusion, is what he's saying.
pretty much,
Your
I suppose
perception within the one reference frame is always going to be constant, but as soon as you move from that, you're actually going to discover that it was an illusion, just like a mirage on the
or
desert.
it's
But
actually
we've never
it
seen
would
that.
look. If he said
never
no,
seen
it would only look
Yeah,
like it
but
didn't
it's-
happen if you were in the absolute reference frame.
Okay,
just-
and that
I just-
experiment doesn't bear itself out either because they've done the measurements in different places.
Oh,
So-
sure. No, he says that He'll only ever be proven right if you were in the absolute reference frame, which is something we could never actually access. I put a link in
the center point by which everything is orbiting around or whatever, like the original reference point of the Big Bang or whatever.
Right, and it's a bunch.
Well, you don't need that. You don't need the absolute reference frame to make that inference. Mathematically, it bears out. Like when you look at the math, the proofs that they've done, it's basically, yeah.
Actually, didn't I write a paper on that, Neil?
I don't know. I don't know if I wrote that. If I read that, it would be a statistical proof if it was.
I think I wrote a paper on that.
I mean, they did all the measurements, right? The clock measurements. They had so many different measurements that they had a margin of error, plus or minus such and such, which was inside their measurements, showing that time dilation was pretty consistently following relativity.
Oh.
Now, we might find that as we approach the actual speed of light, that this is different, that it's actually not 100% accurate to relativity, and in fact, I would probably bet on it. It's not going to be a linear equation. But, for now, and for what we're seeing, it's close. Just like Newtonian mechanics is close in predicting the orbit of the planets. I mean, it's fine and accurate enough to describe exactly where you're going to see Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Saturn, beyond the problem of solving 3+ body mechanics. I mean, it does predict those motions to within a certain accuracy, right? And so does our current theory of relativity. Within a certain period of accuracy, we're reasonably sure that this is occurring.
Oh, so the way he responds to that, and I shit you not, if you look at the link I put in the chat box for the show, he will complain about the verificationist assumptions of scientists.
There's no verification assumption needed. I mean, we go into it with what is actually happening. We're looking.
I will counter that argument right back and Chris up. All we have to do is say that our margin of error does exist. We will admit the inaccuracy, but we will say that you can't discount the observations and the inference that they make based on what that inaccuracy is, because the inaccuracy is too small. So,
well, like I wrote a paper on the Big Bang, okay, and one of the paper I wrote was that one of the things that we could be looking at is the perspective problem, where we could have a localized event that happened in our region of space, within our viewing area, that could strew our data.
Just to note, the topic was apologetics, and I think we're going too much into cosmology.
Yeah, I think we are too. Okay.
Well, we're talking about it as it would relate to the argument, right?
Well,
can you make an assumption given that you have inaccuracy? And I think this is very relevant to your argument.
And
my answer to that is yes.
Well, so
it becomes a perspective problem, and that's what my paper was about. Is we have a very perspective problem looking at it from our viewpoint, and that's something that we need to learn to step away from, and to actually try to look at it from many different possibilities.
So
instead of being narrow-minded.
What you're doing is you're being scientifically honest. And
right. Exactly.
The problem there is that what he says is he's made his theory, this whole Neo-Lorentzian view, completely unfalsifiable. You can't prove him wrong.
But how does he say that?
It's a hypothesis. It's not
Correct.
even
how does he say that? He says that because he's saying that the fact that there's inaccuracies means that you can't make a supposition. We argue that and say, well, no. In fact, you can make suppositions. Some of them are going to be wrong, but enough of them are right in certain qualities that we have to be able to make certain inferences.
No question.
Otherwise, just by his own definition, he can't make his own supposition in theory because he's inaccurate.
So what he says to that explicitly, he says you have all the data in the world to back up your interpretation of special relativity. But you could technically still be wrong, and he will basically state that I have other reasons for believing in the Neo-Lorentzian view, and one of them is literally that it's theologically objectionable, and that because the creation ex nihilo, which is described in the Bible, implies God existing in a theoretic time, and relativity would basically rule that out. I don't accept all of your evidence.
Okay, well, we can talk about that in those terms, but you can't reduce it just to, yes, it is, no, it isn't, because otherwise we might as well not even be having a discussion, right? I mean, that's just a circular argument of idiocy.
I mean, it sounds like he does a precept about, well,
He
God had to do it
absolutely-
his way that the Bible says it was.
He will also give, so it is circular, he does give a bunch of other arguments as to why you should accept his view of relativity. It has nothing to do with science. He basically makes a bunch of metaphysical arguments. So, like, you would...
Well, I mean, science is pinned by a metaphysical argument. We think, therefore we are. Well, we might
Right.
not be. You know, who's to say we are? Who's got the proof
And
of that?
that's also looking from a quantum state, too. Because in
But
the
we
quantum
make
state, both
that
exist
metaphysical
and don't
argument
exist.
for the sake of having an actual debate, having an actual observation, having an actual experiment in
Right.
the first place, right? And if we're going to have a theological debate, then we also have to define our system. Otherwise, what are we doing? Are we having a debate, or is it just him dictating terms?
Let's read Christopher Hitchslap.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Okay. What's up?
A little bit
Awesome
low,
freaking
but-
name, man.
Yeah, I love your periodic table there. That's pretty cool.
That's a good picture right
Yeah,
there.
it's
It's
cool.
pretty good.
The whole, actually, the whole, what they call it, the creation of man or the, something.
Your audio's going in and out.
It is, yeah, I just go internet problems, man.
Oh,
Is it
Maybe-
bad?
more than one Skype
Talking
call?
through the robot, actually.
Oh, no.
No, maybe Hitchens was turned into Darth Vader. Maybe.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe he has Stephen Hawking's problem.
Yeah.
Isn't that like, what is that, Parkinson?
Yeah, something like that.
No, Lou Gehrig's disease, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
No, he has Lou Gehrig there.
Is it cut out?
How
Is it cut
about
out?
we change gears to another apology?
Christopher, if you can type, why don't you type, and then we'll be able to see it.
Let's
Yeah, I can't really...
Yeah.
see. Is audio just bad?
All I can hear is that.
Yeah, I hear...
Wait. Let me, Neil. We'll call you later, okay?
Okay.
Oh, there he goes.
Okay.
Okay,
Try
I'll counter.
Now.
How about we do a different argument?
Sure. So, what... All right, you want to go something that's still a little sciencey, or do you want to go to something more
Let's go with
philosophy-based?
the teleological.
Okay, so the design argument, basically. And so, this is the one where I actually think it's a pretty strong argument, because you hear it a lot when you talk to believers trying to justify their faith. But basically, they say that all of the different constants that we found in physics, like the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, speed of light, there's a whole bunch of constants that are seemingly unrelated to one another, and that if they were vary just the tiniest 1/100th of a millionth of a fraction, then life as we know it would be impossible.
That's not true.
Well, I think I kind of was. That's what they say. That's
yeah,
what they'll
not
say.
true though. We've proven in physics that you don't need the strong or the weak.
Can I well, actually, since you clearly know more on the actual physics of this than I do, can I throw what my answer to that was, and
Sure.
tear it apart if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
So the answer that I normally had for that would be the off by a billionth, millionth, or whatever of a degree is actually only related to the fact that if you hold all the other constants static and you move one of the other things to that tiniest little degree, then yes, everything falls apart. Except that's not a valid analysis of it, since if you are allowed to kind of move all the dials at once, then there's a wide range of physical possibilities for the constants to be set at and still have life be permissible.
That's actually true. That the other thing is we've also realized that we can substitute the weak for the strong and the strong for the weak. Gravity isn't always necessary. We see that in nature, actually. So to say that it just moving one or two, a billionth of a billionth of a billionth, yes, it would change the way our universe looks, but it would not necessarily stop our universe from being in existence. The one thing that could totally drastically change the way our universe is the expansion of space. itself. If we change that variable, then we might have a whole nother problem.
Right. So
that is the only thing that is actually absolutely set, that it could totally destroy any argument that, if that was changed, our universe would look drastically different. And it could have devastating effects where life could not be possible. But changing any of the other forces in nature, and we've proven that you can still have galaxies without the strong. We've proven, and these are all in models that we've done in computers. We haven't actually seen it in nature, but we've tinkered with it enough that we know that you can take the strong force away, and the weak force can compensate. So we can take the weak force away, and the strong force would compensate. So yeah, you're exactly right, Counter. As long as we're able to manipulate the other ones, no, it's not necessarily true.
Yeah. So the trick there is when you encounter that argument with a theist, you basically have to say, all right, no, you're playing with the question to make the probability seem way more in favor of it needing to be finely tuned, or that there has to be a designer, when that's kind of, I don't know what the name of the fallacy would be, but you're not asking a fair question.
You're not.
Is the first
and
thing.
I would actually pose it in a different way. We're more finely tuned for our existence in this universe than the universe is finely tuned for us.
Well, that's what I've heard a lot
right.
of.
That's the anthropic principle, basically, yes. Is that we evolved as our kind of a carbon-based life form because all of the different forces, or
if you just look at how we're designed in general, we're actually in exact proportion with the elements in our universe. That's just it in a nutshell. We have the exact same amount of hydrogen in our body as the universe has in proportion. What is it, 22%?
I think there's a lot more than that of hydrogen, I think.
Oh, wait,
oxygen's the third.
Neil, what is it?
I think hydrogen is the most common element, I believe.
We're actually in an exact proportion, actually, with the rest of the universe for what makes us up. So that should be an indication that we're actually kind of designed for the universe. The universe isn't designed for us.
Well, pretty much in this state of the universe, where these elements are in a certain amount of abundance, we would be expected to be made of these things.
Right.
If the
but
universe
it's not
was
just
older,
part of the universe, it's the universe in general.
If the universe was older, maybe life wouldn't be like us.
Right.
Maybe it would be silicon-based.
True.
Yeah, that's something. The other thing that I kind of wanted to throw out there, and that I kind of think is an answer, but I'd really like your take on it, Chris, is that we think that these constants are all set and they're independent of each other. But and so they try to use that as a, hey, look, there has to be a designer. But that's not necessarily the case. If my understanding of it, which is basic, is that if, say, string theory turned out to be true, then all of those things basically kind of are explainable because of string theory, and they're not actually finely tuned, and that there's a mechanistic way in which those values are set based on whatever the causal conditions of our space-time coming to existence.
Well, see, that's the whole thing, is we don't actually even know if there's a causal effect. The fact, the universe could be in existence because the universe is in existence.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that cause and effect don't necessarily have to be in that order. Effect can come before cause. So the universe being here could be the result of the universe being here.
Yeah. When I say a beginning of space time, I like to think of our space time as a little bubble, and that there's something greater that is a bubble in.
You mean like
kind of a deal? Yeah, something along those lines. And so I think that there's the way I choose to look at it, because once you get to this point in science, like theoretical physics and cosmology and everything else, we don't know. That's the most honest answer. We do not yet know. Followed up by, we might not ever know. But just because we don't know does not mean you can say, therefore Yahweh did it. Or Allah. It does not.
Well, now saying we don't know doesn't necessarily mean we'll never know.
Correct.
And that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that we may not at this very moment understand why the Big Bang happened. But that's not to say several thousand years from now, or even a couple of decades from now, we won't know. I mean,
there was one of the things Lawrence Krauss said that gave me a bit of a shock. In one of his talks on the universe from nothing, was he said that because the universe, once you go out far enough, the universe is basically expanding at the speed of light, and so things have expanded far away from us. So if we were looking into the sky a couple 100,000 years from now, like if we didn't evolve, if we evolved later, there's evidence that we have now that we would not have we have now that we would not see if we were looking up for the first time then, because things would have expanded so far away from us at that point that we wouldn't be able to collect the data that we have now. And so
or we wouldn't be able to actually be able to see even.
Actually, I think the expansion of space and time is actually slowing down. And the reason I say that is because
I've heard the opposite. I've heard the opposite.
That's where I actually disagree with a lot of the.
Wait. Why would you say it's slowing down, Chris?
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. A lot of physicists tend to forget that whenever we're looking at how objects are moving away from us in the past versus now, we're seeing objects moving a lot slower than when we're looking 13 billion years out. So, to me, it's kind of intuitive to think that it's actually slowing down. And when we're looking that far back, we're seeing the expansion still happening.
But wait, I'm curious though. If that, what you say, wouldn't we see a blue shift in the Doppler effect?
Not necessarily. I mean, that could be a perspective problem, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. And you talk to a lot of physicists about this. Is that it could be possibly a perspective problem, and that's what we're seeing as the red shift, because the red shift's absolutely everywhere, and that poses a kind of a problem. And almost every physicist is sitting there going, that should not be possible. And we explain it away as the whole universe is moving away from us because of a perspective problem, and that the universe is rapidly expanding. Well, that could not be the case. That might not be the case. What we're actually seeing is an illusion that's set forth on us because of our perspective, because we're looking at it from a galaxy that's moving at a rapid rate in a certain direction, and it could be just that.
But I'm curious though, if it's slowing down, would that mean you go with the idea the universe would have a big crunch ending?
Not necessarily. I mean, it could come. That's a very good possibility. But if everything gets
big crunch, I've heard of the big crunch, and it's actually, from what I understand, it's actually been discounted because of the fact that all the mass that's of the universe is actually still moving away. It's too
spread out.
Right. There's not enough to pull it back in, basically.
Right. There's not enough gravity left to pull it back.
What would end up happening is the universe would pretty much stall out if it is slowing down. And
yeah, but like I said, I've heard the opposite. It's actually speeding up. It's not actually slowing down.
Yeah, it depends on who you talk to. There's a lot of physicists in this area that a lot of them think that it's not. We're having a perspective problem, and a lot of them will actually say that. They do say that it appears that it's speeding up, but it's actually, if you look at the relation to anything within, I think it's like 20 million light years, everything's moving at a slower rate than anything that's outside of that. And further back we go, we see it moving faster and faster and faster. We got galaxies that are moving faster than the speed of light when you get far enough out. Which
technically should not be possible.
Right.
Yeah, how do we see those things?
But if you look at it from the point of view of a rapid expansion of space and time, okay, and we're looking back in the time, okay, then that actually starts to make sense because you're going further back in time, and yes, now they're going to appear that they're moving faster than the speed of light because the universe is expanding at a much faster rate. And as infantry sets in, everything starts to slow down, and we get to the point where space and time is not going to be expanding as fast.
Except
The amount of energy that would be required for it to keep speeding up is why we sit there and say that there's dark energy and dark matter, because we don't understand why intuitively it shouldn't be moving faster in the past than it is in the future.
Right. Well, I was thinking that if, as I remember correctly, the reason why they're saying that the universe may actually be speeding up and not slowing down because the effect of gravity is actually being stretched like a rubber band, as it were, and we're reaching past that point. Actually, that's why. But they've discounted the big crunch on that though, because eventually, when if let's say if I were trying to leave the Earth, I do eventually break the bonds of gravity, and the gravity of the universe itself is actually speeding apart because all these vast bodies, they're actually moved so far apart that they're actually still.
I can't hear you, Pat.
Yeah, what's that, Packard? Christopher, are you there? Chris?
I think he's in
I'm here. Is it still breaking up?
No, but we hear something in the background.
Yeah, now you sound like you're coming in from NASA now.
Oh, is it that big? Is it bad right now?
Control, we have a problem.
I'm trying to do it over my cell phone.
It sounds better.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit louder. Yeah, but for me, it sounded like you were on a satellite.
Sound like it was in a machine.
Yeah, yeah. What an upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a bad area that has kind of poor cell service, but it relies on my internet connection. Can you hear me? Is it real bad right now?
No, you're actually pretty better than you were before.
Okay.
So,
well, hello everybody.
On before we lost you.
I'd like to say I love your channel.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to work. I'm taking it in a different direction now. But the content on there is, of course, it's mostly related to Christopher Hitchens and the Four Horsemen and all that stuff. But yeah, right. The direction I'm trying to take it right now is more of I'm the one that's calling into the religious radio shows. And you have to be really careful about doing it and how you approach it, so they allow you to call in. But anyways, that's kind of what I'm doing right now. Could everybody hear that?
Yeah, we heard it.
Yes, we heard it.
Okay.
We're like you finished talking.
Oh yeah. There's a slight delay, but I would encourage everybody to do it. It's actually it's actually pretty fun, and you really don't have to have a topic in mind. All you have to do is just listen to them for a few minutes, and they'll definitely give you a subject matter to address by the time they get to your call.
They'll let you go on even if you have a contrary viewpoint?
Well, see, that's you'll notice in there's a few of my videos. What they do is they screen your call when you call in, and kind of get a general feel for what kind of a question you're going to ask. So I keep it real general, but usually what happens when I call in, you have to front load the whole question and your whole argument, because as they're responding, you're usually cut off by that time. So you really only get to put your comment up there. So you'll notice, like on some of mine, they're very, very heavily front loaded to where, I mean, I've even written some out that are pretty long because I know I'm not going to get a chance.
You're not going to get they'll cut you right off because they don't want the that's the one thing I've noticed in all of apologetics. Whoever quote unquote wins is whoever gets the last word, and it's more along the lines of it just points to the fact that the questions are at best are unresolvable.
Yeah, that isn't always the case though. But I mean, like Chris there. I mean, if you watch any of his. Hitchens may not always get the last word in, but most of the time he just stomps all over anybody that's talking to him.
Right. What happens is I guess from the perspective of somebody who's in the believer mindset, the apologetic argument, as long as it gives, and if you read what say like a Craig or whoever when they write, is they just ultimately they're not actually trying to convince. They will admit they can't show that their God exists. They can't definitively logically prove it. But what they can do is give reasons to make it seem reasonable. And so what they're afraid of is that they're eventually going to get to the point where society looks at them and they go, "You're out of your mind." That's like saying that Thor still exists or something like that. And people like Sam Harris's quote is. If you go into a job interview and you say that you met Elvis still walking around like 10 minutes ago, there's an immediate price you pay. in social currency with the people you're talking to. Like, you're immediately going to pay a price. And what they're afraid of is going to happen is that they're going to walk into something and say, I'm a Christian, and have the same kind of price be extracted. That's what they're afraid of happening. And that's really the goal of apologetics. There's actually, I could throw a link if you wanted somewhere. I've got it buried in here.
You could post it in the chat.
Sure.
We'll of course, I guess, put it on the video.
Okay.
On the YouTube thing. But Chris, what about you name an argument? One we didn't.
What do you mean? What?
Apologetic argument.
I haven't really got a chance to listen to the whole front of the show, so I heard a little bit talking about the black holes and time dilations. It would probably sound arrogant, but it's a good thing that I haven't really heard a good argument from even William Lane Craig, and especially this presuppositional apologetics is to me it all seems worthless. It's like, is that really where you're going to put your God now? It to me, and like we were talking on the Skype a few days ago, it really is waving a white flag, because now you're just reducing him to it possibly could be true, or even if there's a 1% chance it could be. I mean, it's so ridiculous that I haven't
state of no power whatsoever when you put him in the state that Craig puts him in.
Well, I mean, to me, it seems like the 19th century destroyed evidentialism in apologetics, and now they go to presuppositionalism because that's the only thing they could do.
Well, it breaks down into, you'll have some people who will realize that, like Saita Bergati, he's way out there in the presuppositionalist, and if you read why he went into presuppositionalism, was he realized somebody finally, it got through his head that his cosmological argument and all these natural theology arguments didn't work. Like, he actually internalized the evidence that says, no, this is a bunch of crap. Like, it doesn't establish its conclusion. And rather than take that to the, conclusion of, wow, maybe my God doesn't exist, he straight up went into presuppositionalism and said, when you try to give an evidential argument, that you're actually denying that God exists, like you're acknowledging the position that God doesn't exist, which the Bible technically says you're not supposed to do.
Well, that's what any religion technically is. It technically says that God exists, right?
Well, no, it says that you're not supposed to even acknowledge that there is no God. Like you're like Paul. It's something in the Apostle Paul wrote it. I can't remember which epistle it was, but it basically says that
no
everybody.
Exists.
No, it's everybody, and everyone has it written on their hearts that God exists. Everybody, no one can be held. No one is without excuse. Is what it is, something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing, but he says the Bible says everybody knows that God exists. So therefore, when you pretend that it's reasonable to believe that it isn't, you're contradicting the Bible. That's Sai's basis for jumping when he realized the natural theology stuff was crap. That's why he went into presuppositionalism.
You mean like Eric?
Oh, and that's why they latched onto it. So I mean, when Eric Hovind got a hold of that presupposition thing, he was. You could almost see the relief on his face that he was going to have to, that he didn't have to back up any of this evidence anymore. But to me, it really sounds like white noise, and I don't see how it could sound any better to anybody that they're trying to convince. Because, I mean, I think when you're debating, you're really doing it for the people, the listeners who's on the outside. And I can't imagine how dumb that must sound with the presuppositional thing. I was supposed to debate Eric Hovind on the 29th, but I guess he changed his mind on doing that. But I don't know. I've got a
like
it was one
argument
online. It was going to be on this blog. It was going to be on a blog chat for you or something like that we had been negotiating back and forth for the last week, and we had it set for the end of this month, and then I guess it just fell apart. So, but it's harder to debate like the Catholic network that I call into all the time because they accept scientific evidence. What's harder is, and that's the hard one, what's easy is when you've got these just blatant claims made by, or just ridiculous, preposterous claims made by the creation side. Those are a little bit easier, I'll admit, debates to get involved in. Because they're actually making a claim.
Well, speed of light, just every young Earth creationist, you get smacked down. And a video I was going to make, I kind of put on the back burner, is William Lane Craig, Dinesh D'Souza, and all them, they throw the young Earth creationists straight under the bus. Like, Craig on a podcast, like maybe a couple weeks ago, said that young Earth creationists are an embarrassment to Christianity and are causing people to leave the faith.
Wait, even oh god, the guy on the 300 Club? What's his
Robertson, Pat Robertson.
Yeah,
said,
even him says it's bullshit.
Oh, what's his, Ken Ham. Ken Ham was pissed.
Well,
he was
Ken Ham
pissed.
pissed about anything. He got pissed.
Well, I know, but he was pissed at Pat Robertson. It was like fratricide. It was amazing. It was just like, you know, when you have like Dinesh D'Souza and E. Hutchinson, they debated Krauss and Michael Shermer.
I think they debated Hitchens also.
Yeah, it was like it wasn't even that long ago. But they came out and said, no, we believe in an old universe. We believe in the Big Bang. We believe in evolution, but we believe God's behind it. And they admitted in the debate that science disproves fundamentalist readings of the Book of Genesis. So I just kind of want to point to, I'll be like, here's your big defenders. You've got Ray Comfort and Ken Ham as the only people who are going to stand up for the young Earth creationists.
And Ken Hovind.
And Ken Hovind. He's in jail. Screw him.
Okay, his son.
Oh, his boy.
Right. He's still around.
I think Ken Ham is proof of evolution. He still looks like he's still evolving.
Yeah, he looks like the apes from Planet of the Apes.
He does. He really does.
He looks like those white chimps that caused the to nuke themselves. I think it was.
Yeah.
Those were they orangutans? I don't remember. But yeah.
No, those were in the original movie. Those guys were like subhumans, but they were all scarred, and they were just
not the mutated people. Not the.
Oh, you're not mutated people.
The head monkeys.
The chimpanzees. Yeah, those would be the chimpanzees with the red hair.
Yes.
Yeah, they'd be the chimpanzees.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Those are the orangutans, I think.
Orangutans. No, you're right. Orangutans. I'm sorry. Chimpanzees are black hair. Sorry.
Here's the thing that I love about when you get the guys who will admit that evolution happened, and they will admit the old Earth, then they're opening themselves up to a really pretty good critique, because a lot of, like, when you see there's conflicts between religion and science, it's always kind of looked at from the science perspective. But they have so many theological things that are really important to a fundamentalist. So if you ever Google, like, historical Adam, if they believe in evolution, well, they believe in genetics. Well, we didn't have two people as a bottleneck to the human race. We did not all descend from two people. That's impossible. It's genetically proven.
Even the Catholic Church acknowledges that now, at least, that the two people being the sole providers for the human race is just downright fucking ridiculous.
So the thing that's awesome is you ask them, well, how do you account for this? Because how do you get original sin? If there's no Adam, right? And Jesus himself, and any biblical critic will tell you Jesus believed in Adam, so did the Apostle Paul, and so the whole original sin and atonement thing that they have at the center of evangelical Christianity goes away. And so you have like Alvin Plantinga or William Lane Craig, they will say that evolution happens, and then God picked two of the people who were genetically at a certain point, and he made them. He gave them the ability to have free will, and he modified them. So, and when they sinned, that's how original sin got into the thing. So when you ask where, like, Cain's wife came from, he married a Neanderthal, effectively, is what it was, or something that wasn't necessarily a human.
Well, let's go down that road. In apologetics, I've noticed free will is a big part of it, isn't it?
Yes, that's their answer to...
This. How do you know you have free will? Exactly. What does that even mean?
Well, that's actually a very big philosophical discussion. I actually, I'm more of a determinist, I think. I haven't read too much on the subject, but I'm a compatibilist, where it seems like we have free will, like determinism, doesn't necessarily mean fatalism, whereas you couldn't change what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the areas. That's another area where you're going to see. Well, right now you have young Earth creationists denying lots of areas of science. Next area you're going to see a lot of denial coming from Christians is going to be neuroscience, because the more they get rid of this mind-body dualism problem, and the more that you see that consciousness is related to a physical brain.
I would actually say to the mind-body problem, my mind is matter and so is my brain, so it makes sense that my mind would affect matter because it is matter in a sense, right?
Right, and they'll try to bog you down in a how do you account for they call them qualia. It's like the subjective experience of, say, smelling something or being something.
Isn't that like quantum something accounting for smell?
No, it's the subjective experience of being something is what they want to. Well, the experience of seeing a color red, or the experience of seeing a certain color.
Well,
it's philosophical wobble is what it is. It's a bunch of wibble. But if you don't mind a little thing on free will, one of my favorite things on free will is you say, they say that goodness has to be grounded in God's nature. If you do the moral argument thing, they have to say that goodness is God's nature. God nothing can go against their nature, right? So if you look at that, when they frame it and they define goodness in that way, God is not morally free. He doesn't have free will with respect to morality. He cannot choose to do evil because evil is defined as not God's nature.
Then how did God create evil?
Well, he didn't know. They don't say God created evil. They say God created man with free will.
No, not
and
that.
Man chose to go against God's will.
No, but I'm talking about like the devil, who's technically in a sense.
Actually, it says in the Bible that he did create evil, if I'm not mistaken.
There's a passage in Isaiah that he's a creator of good and evil, and the interpretation you'll use to get around that, or that they will use to get around that, is that basically what I said was he created good. He existed, and goodness is him, right? Like that they define goodness as God's nature, and so when he created man with free will, he created the possibility for evil to exist.
Well,
until he created other beings with free will, evil could not exist.
That's like blaming us for his mistake.
Well, I mean, is it me, or from what they say a sin is something whatever God is against, or what God doesn't do?
If going against God's nature, going against what God wants, that is what sin is by their definition.
And yet God made us have free will, which would give the consequence of being evil a necessary.
Or the ability to be evil. He never did anything evil. Yeah, he knew would happen.
Yes,
but that's the thing.
Yeah, that's still blaming us then for what he did.
Oh, it is. It is still blaming us, and that's the whole.
If we made machines, we'd be good, wouldn't we? Then technically.
Well, if we made machines, then we'd be we could be neither good nor evil if we were machines.
No, but because we do whatever God wanted, we cannot go against him. So in a sense, we'd be good.
You guys, nobody's really good or evil.
No, I get that, but I'm saying from that view.
You kind of have touched on kind of the problem here. Think about what they did. They defined goodness as God's nature, right? God can't sin, but God doesn't have free will to respect morality. So when God supposedly created humans with free will, how is that good? It literally goes against the definition of goodness that they have to hold to for their whole morality to work.
On another note...
But it also goes back to they don't have free will after they die and they join them either. They're just these robots that sit up there and praise God.
Right, well, why is free will worth anything then? Why bother creating?
Exactly.
But it can't be. They can't call free will good by their own definition of what good is supposed to be. There is no moral value to free will because all of moral value is wrapped up in God's nature.
It's the Euthyphro dilemma.
Well, it's only God.
It's not the Euthyphro dilemma.
It isn't.
Isn't free will the whole notion of free will anyway just an illusion, as it were?
I don't even know. I really don't know what the free will is.
Free will, I don't think it's an illusion. I think that we have a set. We have a set way that we're going to end up eventually. If we don't really have much of a destiny. We live, we die. What we do in that short amount of time doesn't really amount to anything to the universe.
Not the whole universe, no, but to our, in our timeline, in our own.
To our society, yes, it matters. But over overall, I mean, we're looking at a very short period of time that you're on the Earth, and what you do in it really doesn't make much of a difference to the rest of the universe. In this small little corner of the universe, it does not mean anything.
Well, we do affect life on Earth, so we do have some impact in a small scale, I guess.
Very, very small scale.
Well, it's still something. It's not nothing.
If you would like one of the best things I've ever heard on free will and determinism is there's a podcast called Reasonable Doubts. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to it.
Nope.
I've never heard of that one.
It is they're on. They don't post a lot, but they post. It's on freethoughtblogs.com. If you go there, you can get the feed through iTunes or any kind of podcast thing. It is literally one of the best. I think it's one of the best safest podcasts. I'm sorry?
Send me that name? Yeah, send me that name so I can check it out.
Reasonable Doubts. I will give it to you in just a moment.
I'm just curious, though, Counter.
Sure.
They claim also God is... Yes, I did. Shut up!
And I'm pasting it into the chat box now.
I did shower, now shut up!
They are
Yes,
fantastic.
now shut up. Shut up!
Reasonable Doubts is the name of the podcast. If you search for Reasonable Doubts, Free Will and Determinism, or if you look through their podcast history, they did like 5 episodes on it because it was a very contentious issue. It's actually an active philosophy debate. And their description of determinism, which is a form of compatibilism, was really kind of what switched me over after I had deconverted to, I was like, wow, that really does seem to make the most sense of like what we know from neuroscience at the moment and explaining our everyday experience of living and supposedly having free will.
Back to what I was going to say.
Sorry?
They claim God is perfect, right, by definition, right?
Yes.
And they claim he's infallible. Right?
Correct.
So if
Unless
God
he's
cannot make ever anything that's imperfect.
But they blame the imperfect.
Yeah, they blame it on us.
Yes, I know that,
Right.
but God could see the future, right? He got omni.
Right.
Yes, so he would know if it was going to be imperfect.
Right. Oh,
He
yes.
cannot, if he said it's perfect and to begin with, it has to be perfect forever because he would know forever if it was going to be.
Well, so this touches on what deconverted me, actually.
What I just said.
Very close. That's related to it. Basically, take what you just said and combine it with hell. So the answer to what you're stating is a form of the problem of evil, and that God knew evil would happen after He created everything, and so the answer to the problem of evil is partially free will, and the other related to that is
he's the one who interjected that. I mean, by placing the tree of knowledge into the Garden of Eden, he kind of made evil kind of known to them, and he could have moved that. I like Dark Matter's video probably the best on that. Why didn't he move it out of the garden?
right.
But wait,
Then
they
it's
still
no
would be
then they don't
evil.
have the choice.
They
That's
still
the thing.
could be evil though, because technically speaking, they still had free will, right?
Well, they had free will. That's the whole thing.
Yes, but they didn't know what good and bad was. So in a sense, they would not know God was good or bad. He was indifferent.
It's basically you could kill somebody, and it's not good or bad until you deem it good or bad. And we see that actually in society.
Intention was important on that view of morality.
Well,
There's also I came up with this one several weeks ago, and I talked about it on my show this Friday. If God was all powerful, why didn't, instead of kicking everybody out of Eden, why didn't He just make them forget? Because then He wouldn't have had to worry about the.
Well, he kicked everybody out of Eden, and then he turned around and did the whole flood, and that was just
why
like,
couldn't He just wipe everyone's minds? I mean, what defines someone to be evil? They claim, I guess, it's the spirit. Your spirit became corrupt or something. It's not your mind. It's your spirit, and I don't think God could fix your spirit, honestly.
Well, if He couldn't fix the spirit, then He's not all powerful.
I mean, Christians say the Holy Spirit does that crap, right?
Yeah, it's you get into a number of different.
Why not just give them new spirits then?
Well, then
it's not you.
Then God has to be lazy enough to make new spirits. And, I don't know. Maybe He's lazy. I mean, wait. Here's a bigger question. Here's a bigger question. If God's all powerful, why do He need a day of rest?
Yeah.
Oh, that was for to give us an example.
Oh.
I've literally been through all of that. Through school.
That's
He
actually
didn't need rest, but he wanted in the story to give a good example to humanity.
Oh, that's one of those
So then why the hell he
contradictions where it
claim
says
he
God
needed a
rests and then he
7th
doesn't
day to
rest.
rest? I mean,
Yeah.
he doesn't need a day to rest. God does not need rest because he doesn't. Well, yeah.
Right.
Well, right.
Yeah. If he's all powerful, he shouldn't need. He shouldn't even need to rest. Even using it as an example to us. I think
No,
they
he
use
didn't,
that
that's
as
right.
an
He
example
didn't
for-
need to, but he put it into the story saying that so that it was an example for us. He technically did not need to rest. He was just using it so that we would learn from him.
So-
to know.
I just thought
So
he
he gives us an excuse to sleep.
corner on that day. That's what I think happened.
So you're telling me that's not literal?
Oh, no,
Correct.
well,
God technically
if
did not rest.
if it serves their purpose, it's not literal.
Well, he didn't do anything. So they'll say when you try to go the literal route, they'll say he didn't do anything on Earth that he didn't create anything else. So he was resting in that sense because he was creating before and then he stopped creating and that was his rest.
So what made him change from the unchanging form of creating to the unchanging form of not creating?
The problem with that is that you could kind of go down that whole thing, but they can you're arguing against a fairy tale. They'll come up with how that you'll come up. They'll have answers for that. That's the point, though. When you try to
because it's their story, they can say whatever they want.
Exactly, that's the problem.
But here's my problem is I don't have that luxury in my field. I could say whatever I want, but I'd probably be laughed out of my field and probably never work again. I mean, that's the whole thing whenever you talk about science versus religion. If I was to make up some fantastical thing like midgets freaking run around in a circle and that's what gives the black hole its spin, I would be laughed out of my career and I'd never work again. But when a religious person says something similar, that some dwarf is holding up the sun,
well, that's just another branch of Christianity.
It becomes common knowledge because God put the dwarf there. He's holding it up. I mean, that's what I equivocate anything religious in any. That's the value I equivocate it to. Is that if they're not laughed at and mocked for their stupid ideals, then our society is going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that boils down to the whole tone and interaction argument that goes on. I think there's definitely a time for laughter and time for making fun. So when you do meet a Catholic, be like, you point out the transubstantiation thing, and they just kind of get mad. So you guys know what the transubstantiation thing is?
No.
Yeah, that's where they say the blood, a cracker turns into the body, and the
and the wine literally turns into the body and blood of Jesus.
That makes them all zombies.
That makes them cannibals.
Catholics
Or
believe
cannibals, yeah.
Or zombies.
that is the doctrine of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of creepy, though. How do you know what part
It
of
is
Jesus
kind of,
you're
it is really
It
creepy.
is creepy.
What part
It
of
is
Jesus you eating?
part of his flesh. I
know,
can't-
but which part of his
Could have been an asshole. We don't know.
Wow, eating Jesus' ass.
You're eating his foreskin.
That's got to be in a gay
God.
porno somewhere on the internet, and I do not want to have to. I'm not Googling.
I don't want to see that.
Hey,
Leave it
let's
alone.
get into that. I think of how many pieces of skin, as it were, or flesh have been given away.
It's the same one. It's
And
the
it's the
same
same-
piece, and it's infinitely. That's part of God's infinite nature. I don't know.
Yeah.
They'll explain. It's a fairy tale. They'll explain.
Counter apologist.
Raphael is back.
Frag wants to read an argument he has for Karm.
Okay.
One sec. Let me get him in here. Where is he?
I think I saw a link to Karm.
There he is.
Can't seem to get it to click
There
the
he
link.
is. He'll just tell you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep. Sorry about that. Oh, no, you guys were mentioning a few questions. So, well, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Hold on a second. Yeah, there we go. No, some guy asked on this Karm forum that, why didn't God kill Satan? So, a little troll, but also somewhat serious, I reply, why would God kill what it's properly doing what God designed it to do? And then go on to ask these questions in order. And actually, the thread stopped not long after that. Why would God kill every man, woman, and child on earth except the small few when the survivors were still cursed by sin, hence their offspring would be cursed to sin. Why not just wipe them all out from the start and start from scratch, or fix those God chose to live?
Well, technically, Prag, to me it seems like God already kind of foresaw that, like he put a self-destruct button on the Earth in two ways. One, supposedly in Revelation, is going to destroy the Earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or two, if we go by science, the Earth will be destroyed in 4.5 billion years. So, or,
Exactly.
If you go with
This goes into my next
also,
question.
or,
I mean,
you know-
or three, we nuke ourselves to oblivion.
Yeah,
Like,
I
that's the-
think
the
I
other
would
thing
God-
is, if you look at science, I mean, 99.9% of all species have basically gone extinct. So we're
yeah.
doomed. We're doomed to that existence.
So-
And we're going to become extinct.
well,
the-
we don't know when.
not if.
Yeah,
The thing like pragmatic, kind of what you were reading there is what the problem is that when you ask that sort of thing, like, so somebody who's like the quote unquote sophisticated theologians, they'll have an answer for that, and they actually they'll spin that kind of argument to try and seem like it's in their favor. And so what they want to say is, to answer your point, Strife, that you had a while ago, is that God couldn't create without the possibility of evil happening. So that's how they answer the problem of evil. They say he could not make creation, and no matter how many times he recreated it, evil would always find a way to come back as long as there was free will.
Then
Oh,
why
yeah,
the
and
fuck is he...
If you let me continue the few
please,
next
please, I'm
questions,
sorry, I
this
didn't
is
mean
where
to
it gets
cut you off.
interesting. I asked, why would God punish Judas Iscariot for fulfilling what God foretold would happen? Why would God need to forgive those who crucified Jesus when Jesus was destined to be crucified by man in order to save man from a punishment man was designed to be given? Could this all be part of God's divine plan? Could it be that that what we chose to believe or do is pointless because what God distanced us to become is outside our control? Could it be that those in heaven and those in hell were equally unable to challenge or to change the end results of their existence? Could it be that...
Determined?
Oh.
Isn't that just predetermination? Or
Calvinism.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
Calvinism. There's two.
That's where I'm
different
going
things.
at. It's like Calvinism or drop it. Because unless you go towards Calvinism, which is not a very appealing religion for many people.
Well, the best part about Calvinism is that it admits their God's an asshole.
Exactly. At least
literally
give them that
admit.
credit.
I
I'm like,
mean-
hey guys, thank you for at least being somewhat honest.
Yeah.
They won't call it that, but it's really that gets the whole thing. Is you say God has morally sufficient reasons for permitting evil, is what they say. That's the answer to the problem of evil. I mean, underlying a lot of what your objections there, pragmatic, and what you said a while ago, Strife. It's a form of the problem of evil. Why would this be allowed to happen? And the thing is that you say, well, he has morally sufficient reasons to allow it to happen, so a greater good can happen later. That doesn't work because we already know God's end game according to the Bible. God's end game is all the bad people in hell, all the good people in heaven. And we know for a fact, if you're a Christian, in Matthew, I think it's in Matthew 19, it explicitly states that there are few people who will be saved, and the path to hell and the path to damnation is wide and broad, and many will be condemned. So what deconverted me was when God made this choice to create, and he knew he couldn't create without having a hell and without having evil, he had to say, I'm going to create people knowing that the majority of them will go burn in hell, so they'll be tortured forever, so that a small subset of people that I couldn't create without the other people, because they had to be created, so they could live in eternal paradise with me. And if that is the conundrum you have when you're before creating all of the universe and all of everything, if that's the only two choices you can have, the only moral choice is to not create. Like, fuck it, I'm not doing anything. He's already existing in perfect harmony in a trinity of...
Yeah, I mean,
here's where it gets interesting, though. I asked like this. I go, could it be that it's all the same in God's eyes, and what you do and believe is meaningless outside the divine plan? And this is where I actually pissed off some Calvinists. Would this mean that preaching the good news is simply a waste of time and effort? What you do doesn't matter. It's only what God decides that counts?
They will agree with that. Many of them will agree with that. That is what they are doing by preaching, and this is what Cy Tim Burgundy will do. He is facilitating and hopefully facilitating the circumstances so that the Holy Spirit will come to you. So that God's plan is that somebody will preach the gospel, and that when the person hears it, God's already preordained that that person will convert, and he'll send the Holy Spirit to them to convert. But somebody in the plan had to preach the gospel for that person to hear it. So when Sai does his shit, that's what he's doing. He's fulfilling the plan. He's being a facilitator to God's plan. He's just being a tool.
Yeah,
it's not hard to point out that God doesn't understand the rule that the easiest way to get somewhere is a straight line.
Well, I mean, Craig. I mean, from what it seems like, why does God like pretty much Sai 10 as being a tool? Seems like why don't you just make him into a robot to do this for you? Or why the hell don't you just do it?
Well, technically, the Calvinists believe we are kind of robots.
Well, technically, the Holy Spirit, I guess, is like...
There is no free will in Calvinism,
well,
since we technically are robots.
Well, yes, Jesus controls you.
There's the elect, and then there's the reprobate. The elect go to heaven, and the reprobate go to hell.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I quoted Revelations 21, 1 through 4, which basically describe, that there will be no more death, tears, and sorrow. If you read it, it's interesting, but I go, couldn't that be implying that heaven simply stands still, nothing happens? Hence, that's why there's no more death, tears, and sorrow. And of course, how do you know that your loved ones are actually in heaven? All these things.
They're in hell. Won't you be sad?
Right. No, that's one of the major problems with the concept of heaven, frankly.
The way I've heard it explained, and I've heard Matt Dillahunty actually explains pretty well on this. If let's say his mother was dead and she was up in heaven and she would be, and Matt's in hell, right? And would she be happy that he was there? Of course not, because if God has replaced her sadness with happiness, it's not actually her. It's something else, and it's not actually her mother.
Wait, Packard. Remember, they claim they have to be reborn with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, then it's the same thing. If they're reborn, it's not them.
Yes, I understood that. So I'm saying, why would God make you as you, only to say you're a fucking despicable piece of shit?
Exactly.
And unless you are reborn, you're a piece of shit.
Right.
So if you're not reborn, you're a piece of shit. But I made you a piece of shit to begin with.
Right.
So I have to remake you to make you not a piece of shit. But remember, I made you as a piece of shit.
Yeah,
that's schizophrenic.
Well, no. So
if God made me a piece of shit to start off with, obviously he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Why should I trust him on the second half?
Well, ask Christianity that.
I know.
Craig has
God
a hilarious
can't control his own behavior.
It's so laughable. He will state that it's the whole ought implies can problem that he brought up in his debate with Sam Harris for morality. And so technically, on original sin, if you accept that in Christianity, you don't have the ability. You cannot fulfill God's law. You cannot fulfill what Christianity says you need to do.
There's no way you could. There's no way you could. There's absolutely no way.
And that's in their theology. So if you ought to do something, you have a moral duty. That a moral duty is an ought. You have no can, so it doesn't work. And so Craig's answer there was the original Adam was the federal headship of humanity, and he was selected. So his choice is the same choice that any other human, if they were the historical Adam, would have made. So we can't complain that he fell, that we weren't given the choice.
But wait, it was not Adam that did the choice, it was Eve.
No, Adam chose to accept Eve's thing. Remember, it didn't matter. Remember, she ate. They didn't realize they were naked until he bit it.
But still, she's needed to have sex to have children. So, in a sense, it doesn't matter if Adam didn't eat the apple. He would still bang her, I guess, and have children, right?
Well, yeah.
Hey,
that's...
Hey, Strife, can you add Joe Unseen?
Who?
Joe Unseen?
Yeah, that's my co-host from my show.
Wait, do I have... Can you can add him. Click the plus sign.
Yeah, I can add him in.
Okay, do that, and I'll call him.
All right, I'll add him in.
But yeah, pretty much, is sin from the mother?
Technically.
When you get into some of this, like that original Adam stuff, you have to ask, you say, well, is that what Jesus was? Like, could we, through genetics, get rid of the gene that is original sin and make another Jesus?
Sin?
Like, yeah.
Like, can we make stormtroopers? Do they have sin? Because technically we made them, God didn't. So, does that mean they're...
Yeah, if we create a clone, does it have a soul? That's why a lot of Christians are really against cloning and shit.
Well, I mean, that's why God made the Y gene in the first place, to pose the question, why the hell did I make this guy in the first place?
Yeah, X and Y.
And what about twins? When when the cell is supposedly
do they have
in
two
the womb,
souls? Do they have one soul?
do they share one soul, or is it just one get it, the other one doesn't? Is it split between them? They get a half a soul?
I think it's maybe they have a half a soul each. Maybe that's how they could do telepathy.
I think it's like parallel circuits. They get like a fraction of a soul in combination.
They've only got one. Each one only has half a soul. Maybe that's why they can't dance.
What about Siamese twins?
Oh wow!
Yeah, does that mean they have two, or they have one? Since they have one body,
they're sharing it through they're sharing it through whatever it is that they're attached to.
Right.
You know.
So from the bottom up, it's one or two.
They steal from their mother's soul.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Joe Unseen from Twitter. I'm on Packard's podcast with him.
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Hey.
What did you want to say?
You guys are really energetic here.
I'm sorry. What was that?
You wanted me to invite him for a reason, right?
Yes, Joe. We've had Joe and I have had lots of conversations about a lot of this stuff here. Joe knows a lot of this stuff backwards and forward.
Sometimes I pretend to.
Isn't that what they're doing?
Okay, because a lot of them pretend that believe that stuff too, and they just kind of talk around in circles. So
I honestly think we've really went adrift.
That's all right.
A little.
I mean,
not
still
really.
On topic somewhat.
Not really. We're still in the realm of apologetics, I guess, with the whole. Yeah.
Well, the questions are apologetic questions. They have to address these questions, or else they can't really defend their position.
Oh wait, counter. You've heard Craig say euthyphro dilemma is a false dilemma, right?
Correct.
What exactly does that even mean when he says that?
So the euthyphro dilemma is good. Whatever is good. Is it good because God wants it to be good, or is it because? So if God wants it to be good, then what's good is subjective. But if it is good, does God like what's good because it's good? So that means that good is something that exists outside of God. So if the good is something that exists outside of God, you don't need God for morality. And so the way that apologists will split the horns of the dilemma, and it actually technically does split the horns of the dilemma, is they say good is grounded in the eternal nature of God.
Isn't that the first dilemma, though?
No, because in the first horn of the dilemma is that you have like a set of you have two possibilities. I can either kill my kid or I can love my kid. And so God has decided that loving my kid is good. And there is no other possible world that God could have decided, oh, you know what? Killing your kid is the good thing, actually. And it's a sin to love your kid.
It's important to address the fact that this is what he revealed his nature to be. He revealed that good.
Well, it just sounds like that's common sense stuff.
Remember, though, God can construe...
Kid, and you want your genes to procreate. That's not a...
Go ahead.
Well, there's answers to... There's answers to biology, but basically that's the euthyphro dilemma. So, I mean, God could say that, like you could say, he says, like homosexuality being bad. Like they say homosexuality is bad and heterosexuality is good. There's no other possible world where God could have chosen homosexuality to be the good thing.
Well, if your kid's going to grow up to be Hitler, you kill your kid. If your kid's going to be gay, as long as they're happy, that's all that should matter.
But would you kill Hitler in 1905? Would you kill
if
him?
I knew that he was going to be... Yeah, I would. Even if it was my kid.
But how would you know?
But then I would...
That's the question.
Actually, I don't think I would even kill my kid. I would try to teach him that what he possibly could grow up to be is wrong.
Yeah,
now,
so
if there was no other avenue and that he was going to turn into...
We actually had this conversation on my show last year. If you knew, even if you... about the whole Hitler thing, because another person who was on my show said, well, what if the mother had aborted Steve Jobs? We wouldn't have the iPhone, the Macintosh, all this other stuff.
No, wait, that's bullshit.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is it was bullshit because we were talking about if you could have gone back and killed Hitler before, or before he was born, for example, and you knew it was going to be Hitler, it would have been the same kind of argument.
Wait.
Well, you'd still end up in the same situation because just because you take one person out of the situation doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, because it wasn't just Hitler that caused the war.
Right.
It was Hitler and the group that he was in that rose to the power.
Right.
He was just a spokesperson for it. So killing Hitler might not necessarily mean that there's not going to be still a World War II.
I mean,
it may have just happened. It may have just happened later.
Well, it could have been just a different person.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Or it could have just been somebody completely different.
Could have been Himmler.
Somebody, by the way.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much the Euthyphro. That's how they get out of the Euthyphro dilemma. Yeah. And that relates to the thing I had spoken about earlier. So if they define goodness as God's nature, then how can they call having free will good? And that puts the nail in the coffin, I think, in the free will defense, the problem of evil. So if you can, the trick there is that you have to hold, like, they'll give you an answer to, say, an apologetic argument somewhere else, and it'll contradict other answers that they have to give you to answer other problems. So you have to kind of hold their feet to the fire. So that's why I actually really like the Euthyphro dilemma, because if they're going to define God that way, that's great, because then that opens them up to a whole different set of problems that they really can't get themselves out of.
I mean, pretty much the whole thing with God and, well, free will, it seems like pretty much God says anything's bad, that if you don't do what I say, the thing that you do that's opposite or not what I say, you're bad. Right?
Well, that actually gets into moral duties. So there's the basis for good and evil, which they'll say is God's nature, and then not God's nature.
Well, yeah, so pretty much anything that God does.
It's good for society, and if it's good for society, we always deem that it's good by God's eyes. If you kill off your neighbors in the Old Testament, and it was good for your society, God told you to do it.
Well, you know what? One of the best things I've ever seen on...
Greg, you're right.
Nope.
That's better.
So, like, one of the best things I've ever seen on defining so this is, we're talking about basically the moral argument, which is like one of the last natural theology arguments that we haven't touched, it's really a problem of definitions again. So, what you had said, how the Euthyphro dilemma, they literally define, you can't talk about morality or objective morality without defining good and evil, which is a big philosophical problem. So they define goodness as God's nature. Well, if you listen to, say, Matt Dillahunty or any secular philosopher who talks about ethics, they define morality in terms of well-being. So right off the bat, you're pretty much talking past each other. And so the theist will ask, well, how do you know that well-being is good? And you kind of would basically say, well, you have the exact same problem. How do you know that God's nature is good? Why should I think that God's nature is the definition of goodness? If you want to see that played out to a good extreme and watch Craig get his ass handed to him, I think his name is Shelley Kagan versus Craig in a morality debate, and he pretty much points that he basically, that point comes to a head, and it's pointed out that in any discussion on ethics or morality, what you define good and evil to be is almost always going to basically be some kind of subjective attribution of value.
Greg, your background.
Yeah, I know. I was about to try to say something, but I can pop off.
No, I'm done. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I hope I didn't talk over everybody.
No.
I was just
hearing an echo.
Oh yeah. Anyways, no, I was just saying. Of course, it has to be subjective, and even if they say, God's would be objective, I could easily say, well, no, God could change his mind, and therefore it's subjective to God. It's never going to be stable, in theory, because what's to say God later on says, I'm feeling like homosexuals are perfectly fine now, and I'm kind of tired of this whole heterosexual thing. So, yeah, everyone needs to stop, screwing their wives and start finding a nice, sexy man over there. And all you women, join, like, Playboy and start joining those lesbian shows and stuff, because, man, oh man, am I running low.
There's a Melissa Etheridge concert for all the women in the world.
All right, I'm becoming a lesbian then. That happens.
I already am.
Yeah, I'm a lesbian trapped in a man's body. That's my.
Yeah, me too.
I'm Sicilian, so I'm supposed to have this hair anyway. So.
No, I'm getting a sex change literally if that happens, and I'm gonna become a lesbian.
Let's not go there.
Right.
But yeah, how about we talk about the most famous argument, the ontological?
Oh. I actually just put a video. That was the last video I put out there.
Is that even an argument?
Yes, it is an argument. It's a bunch of... So all right, last one. The only form of the ontological argument you'll see apologists defend is called the modal ontological argument. That's what Alvin Plantinga became famous for back in the 70s. So the original version is the greatest conceivable being, and if there's a greatest conceivable being in your mind, and it actually exists, well, then it's greater than the conceivable being that's in your mind, so therefore the greatest conceivable being must exist, which was the Saint Anselm's argument, I think it was, his version of it. And that got defeated by David Hume or Immanuel Kant. I think it was Immanuel Kant.
Was it Kant?
Kant, yeah, it was. It was Immanuel Kant. I don't know how to pronounce that crap. And basically saying you're assuming existence is a property when you try to make that kind of an argument. And so that pretty much made the argument fall out of favor, but Plantinga came back and used formal modal logic, where he said that it is possible that there is a necessary being. That is, and the necessary being would be omnipotent, omniscient, wholly good, and it is the greatest conceivable being. And then say, to be the greatest conceivable being, it must exist in all possible worlds in order for it to be this greatest conceivable being. And so when you say that, it means that this being is necessary, logically necessary.
You just define God as God is an existent being, and that's begging the question.
That's exactly what it is.
I've read it. It says pretty much, if God is a necessary being, then he necessarily exists in all possible worlds. If God exists in all possible worlds, he then exists in the actual world. Therefore God exists.
Well, no, you're missing the key premise where they'll try to trick you up. They say it is possible that God exists, and they define God as necessary. And so when you're in it's called the S5 form of modal logic, which is possibility and necessity. And when you're in that form of modal logic, when you say something that is necessary possibly exists, it is literally saying the exact same thing as saying this is necessary. It's saying the same thing. And so even in the book where he made the argument, Plantinga came out and said, we cannot say that this argument establishes its conclusion. And he'll say that all it does is show that since it's reasonable to believe the premise, it's reasonable to believe that God exists. Now, when that itself is wrong, is completely screwed up to even try to say that. But you'll see somebody like William Lane Craig or D'Souza or a bunch of other, like the second-rate apologists. Yeah, they'll throw that out there as though it somehow establishes things, when it really doesn't. It's literally, it's using a bunch of, fancy philosophy to basically say God is a necessary being, and if he's possibly necessary, then he exists, which is literally saying nothing.
Yeah, how do you know it's God?
Yeah, possibility is not proof.
Correct. He just says that's why they say, well, this logically valid. Well, yes, in this one form of modal logic, yeah, technically, but in that form of modal logic, you could say the same thing about an evil God. That's my favorite.
Right.
My favorite counterexample is, I call it the Great Demon. And say you use the exact same logical form, and you say an omniscient, omnipotent, wholly evil being is possibly necessary.
Oh, and there's also the famous God-killing weapon, the omnipotent weapon, because there's got to be a greatest possible killing weapon. Therefore, it exists. Therefore, God is dead.
Yeah, you almost have to.
I never heard that one before.
Yeah. When you make the parody version to try to show it's absurd, if you try to use something like an island or a lion, which were the classic ones that they used like 1,400 years ago when they made up the damn argument, like Craig and them have a fairly easy counter to that, where they'll say, well, no, because there's a possible world where there's no material reality, And if it's an island or a lion, then it requires material reality, so it can't possibly be necessary. So that's why I go with a great demon, because then you're pretty much putting it in their court, and you're saying it's the evil god is a necessary god. And they're not really going to have an answer to that. They have a couple of objections, but I dealt with them in the video that I put up. If you check out my YouTube channel.
Well, I mean, you can prove that your evil god exists, and that God exists, and that this divine ultimate weapon exists, and that they killed each other.
Well, right, exactly. That was the last point I made. Is say, so even if they admit that this exists, you say, well, then you've just proven that two contradictory beings exist, and so since it would basically be as if neither one existed, because the evil god would know every possible action that the good god could take that would make good be the ultimate end result of everything, and he would use his omnipotence to stop him, and the good god would do exactly the same.
They're pretty much just like antimatter and matter. They annihilate each other.
Effectively, it would be as if neither one could actually take any action. But you show how absurd the whole ontological argument is by just using mathematics. You would use it's called Goldbach's conjecture, which is every odd number. Or what is it? Every even number is the sum of two primes, is something along those lines.
Yeah.
And it's never actually been proven. It's been shown to be true to like 4 times 10 to the 18, but it's not known. But if it's true, it's a mathematically necessary truth. And so you would basically say, well, therefore it must be true by the ontological argument, since it's possible that it would be true. And if it was true, it would be necessary. So if it's possibly necessary, it must be true.
So you mean like it's possible that aliens exist, therefore it's necessary aliens exist?
No, the reason it works with Goldbach's conjecture is because mathematical truths would be necessary truths. Metaphysically necessary.
Well, what about life, though?
Then life technically is not... there's a good argument that it's not.
So it does necessarily exist, right?
No, because you're getting into the whole argument of possible worlds and metaphysics, which is just a giant clusterfuck to begin with, and even philosophers do not define metaphysics very well in terms of what is and is not, like, metaphysically valid.
Would you say the Christian apologists of today seem, from what I've noticed, seems like they go from Platonism with the forms, right?
No, Craig will explicitly argue against Platonism, actually.
He does?
Because it actually creates a lot of theological problems if you accept Platonism. Because then God couldn't have created them, and there's an infinite number. If Platonic objects exist, like numbers, then there's an infinite amount of things that God would have to create, of forms that God would have to create. Or if they would have to exist alongside him, then God is not the only necessary existent thing. So it creates a bunch of theological problems for, say, an evangelical Christian. So he will argue very vehemently against that sort of thing. And that's only because like him and Plantinga or Richard Swinburne, who are actual philosophers of religion, will actually deal with shit like that. But like your second-rate apologists like a D'Souza or a Ken Hovind or whoever else, they're not actual philosophers. They don't give a shit about that. They're just trying to put on a show to win converts.
Well, what would you say is the...
Well, I'm going to address that last comment. The problem with these arguments, though, is they don't appeal to anyone but those who already believe. It's basically a statement of, all right, I already believe. This stuff seems to confirm my beliefs due to my ignorance, and therefore I'm justified in my ignorance and will continue being so.
Well, yeah, except they makes them think that they're not ignorant. It makes them think that they've got the right of it. And that's really what all it's for. If you read, I think I posted the one link to the Christianity Today article by Craig, and it's there to make believers in modern scientific times think there's a reason for their belief. Because he says if we don't give these arguments, then in our normal society, people will think that it's crazy to believe this stuff, and people will leave the faith.
Well, the funny thing is it's happening, isn't it?
It is. Oh,
isn't that why there was a surgence of like apologetics and crap in the 70s?
Yeah, that was a good part of it. I mean, it was also that's when logical positivism failed, which is
logical positivism.
Basically that you shouldn't believe in some. If you don't have empirical evidence for something, then you shouldn't believe it. It's meaningless.
It's basically the opposite of I can't even say it. You probably can. But falsification.
No, technically that's still
falsification
holds,
basically states that if you can't falsify it, then it's a meaningless, statement. And logical positivism says if you can't prove it with evidence, empirical evidence, then it's a meaningless statement. To me, I disagree with logical whatever. Anyways, I hate words. But I disagree with the first one because of the fact that you can prove things that aren't unfalsifiable, or that are unfalsifiable. You can still, show evidence of them, but that's just because, well, you could say, well, God exists. How come? Well, because I said so. Basically, unless you can prove it wrong, unless you have some opposing facts that can be presented, there's no point in even presenting, evidence.
Well, that's what falsifiability means. I mean, the reason that my understanding of why positivism failed is that there's no way you can't provide any evidence or empirical statement to say that the reason you should believe in something is only if you have evidence for it.
You could be irrational.
Well, that's the thing. How do you define irrationality? And it's basically if you can't prove positivism is true. You have to appeal to something outside of empirical evidence for positivism to be true, and that violates positivism. And so you're left with this thing of saying, well, okay, well, why do we need evidence for things? And the answer I like to think is, from a pragmatic point of view, is that's the only thing we have that works. Nothing else seems to work.
And it's the only thing that I guess would prove your case. Like if God existed, what would we expect?
Right.
Just like a hypothesis. If my hypothesis is correct, what would we expect? And if we don't get what we expect, it's wrong.
Right, and that's what apologetics is giving reasons to account for things like evil that we wouldn't expect if there was an all-powerful, holy good being. And it's just, it could be...
I would say a Jewish God is more likely than a Christian God.
Well, a deist God, yeah.
The Jewish God is one of the reasons why we know the Christian God's a bunch of BS.
Well, I mean,
because of his Jewish traits.
What?
If you read the Torah, the traits God presents, through his behavior and actions is really what's mostly absurd. In the New Testament, God is less active, directly.
Well, technically speaking,
and it's
he's
more
a person.
Through Jesus Christ.
But technically, he's a person. Instead, he's a disembodied entity who could do whatever the fuck he wants.
Well, if you get into biblical...
Didn't God also go from in the New Testament basically some badass dude to basically Mr. All kissy face, sweet pie?
Yes and no. People
God
like
evolved.
to think that, like the Old Testament God he's the one who says slavery is okay. He's the one who tells you to kill people if you eat pork, or if you talk back to your parents, or if you are homosexual.
Right.
He's the one who says he's the one who commits genocide across the whole human race except for Noah. He's the one who says dash your kid's head against the rocks.
Right.
He does all of the Old Testament genocides of the Amalekites, the Moabites, and all that great shit. He literally commands a genocide. So that's the old bad God. And then you have the new God, which is supposedly in Jesus, which is love your neighbor, the greatest commandment is to love one another, believe in me and you go to heaven. And so people like to say, well, there's the good God in the New Testament, the bad God in the Old Testament. And I think that's a bunch of bullshit.
Well, technically, didn't Jesus said he would not change the law?
Yeah, he did.
Right, he came to fulfill the law.
I have not come to change the laws, but I have come to fulfill them.
Yeah,
Correct.
So pretty much all the old shit that he did, in a sense, if you go by the Trinity, I guess.
Right.
Yeah,
and it doesn't even make sense now. The fact is that there are Christians at all, because if they follow Jesus, who was Jewish to begin with, didn't automatically just become Christian. Jesus was not a Christian. He was Jewish. So the fact is that everybody that's Christian is really basically
playing idolatry.
Right, it's idolatry.
Because technically, God. I guess you could just say Jesus is like God when he was a burning bush. He was like, or he was.
That's all. That can be cleared up with cream nowadays.
You know what?
Yeah, maybe it was a sexual way of saying, "Hey Moses, you got a burning." No, wait, was it Moses? Yeah, Moses.
Yeah, it was
Moses had
Moses.
some kind of.
Moses had a burning bush.
No, maybe he had syphilis.
Well, Jesus did say that he was God now and he's been God forever. So all of the stuff from the Old Testament, that was Jesus,
So Jesus
according
was a
to
burning
Jesus.
bush.
Yeah.
Well, you know what?
Well,
And he had apparently a case of the crabs.
Jesus in the New Testament still, look at what he talks about people who don't believe in him. And the concept of hell as eternal conscious torture didn't really come about into the New Testament. Even Jews to this day don't believe in a hell.
Well, yeah, they think you
Yeah, and
see it,
hell,
right?
the whole concept of
Sheol is what they had.
Yeah, and the whole concept of hell is a total mistranslation anyway, because from what I understand, there's two different possible translations. One, hell was a place, was basically a garbage dump outside of Jerusalem. And the second one, hell is basically was just a term for death. Because no one, in this case, everybody goes to hell because everybody dies.
Well, the thing that's funny, though, is I could see a reason to be scared of the Jewish God, because if you think about it, he could end you anytime he wants, and you disappear forever. You're gone. You know, the only place you live is now.
Right.
While the Christian God, he could take you out, but, you know, it's a good thing or a bad thing, because, you know, you can go to heaven or hell. So you don't have to worry about ceasing to exist either way.
Yeah, but I'd rather, well, especially from a Christian point of view, or someone who deconverted, fucking annihilationists and universalist Christians are way better morally than anything. I mean, like...
Neffy's a annihilationist, and he's crazy.
Well, I'm
the
just
thing.
saying
That's
morally from a
crazy,
moral
so-
standpoint. I mean, my opinion, what really deconverted me and what I think is one of the biggest arguments against evangelical Christianity is hell. And that's why... Packard, I think when you had mentioned the place, the Gehenna, is the garbage dump where they burn bodies.
Right.
So if you look at Randall Rouser, who's a very quote-unquote liberal evangelical, when they take the annihilationist view, the reason that exists is because people have argued about hell. Hell is eternal conscious torture. You have to be okay with God wanting to torture people so other people could be in heaven. We have the Eighth Amendment. Are Americans more moral than God? We won't allow torture, but God will.
Yeah.
So that's why...
Well, no, I agree with you there. I think everybody, if they really put their minds to it, we are actually more moral than the gods that they pretend or pretense to worship.
Well, no
but
shit.
they won't. But they're afraid to admit that, because they're afraid if they actually admit that they're more moral than the God that they believe in, and then they would be feeling that they were better than the God, and they could be contenting themselves to hell, as it were.
Do you want to know what? One thing, when we have atheist shows like this, we really need... something that I guess should always maybe preface it with, most believers are way better than their religion. They don't realize that
absolutely.
shit. They do not realize that shit. I didn't mean to imply that you didn't. You didn't agree with that statement. I did not mean to imply that at all. It's more of a... People don't think about it. Like, how many Christians fucking think about hell and what that really means for everybody else? You don't go there. I was a believer for 27 fucking years. And you literally just don't think about that kind of shit. And you don't... You know, I eventually, because of all the Christian school and theology stuff that I did in my church, like, you know, I understood all this crap, and that's when I started having problems. Most people don't even go to church, but they still identify as Christian.
On my show, we talk about the Bible every show, or pretty much every show, and we meet in the middle of the week. And we talk about it then too. I mean, we basically have a Bible study twice a week.
The argument that annoys me the most, though, is when you talk about that, you know, you'll have some of those fundamentalists saying, well, those aren't true Christians. And then you get into the whole, you know, no true Scotsman fallacy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Fallacy? Yeah, I get that a lot.
That pissed me the fuck off. I put it up. I have on my blog, I had written, like, what my goal was, and I had 2 evangelicals show up and say, you weren't really a Christian. So I put up a very long, like, hey, this is shit I did as a kid and as an adult that nobody knew about, that I did because of my faith, and they came in and said, no, you really didn't believe. No, you would have had to give yourself unconditional.
Pretty much saying that, it's pretty much like, I guess, Scientology, where they say, oh, well, you never really leave the faith. You still believe in it, right?
Well, essentially just neglects purity. That's what the whole fallacy is about. You know, you're basically saying, well, this can't be impure, and by saying so, you're trying to shove under the rug any evidence against your argument and say, well, since it's impure, since it contradicts my argument, it therefore is not part of my argument.
Silence all naysayers.
Well, that's the thing. Is it would people leaving the faith actually falsifies the faith. It falsifies the Bible, so they cannot permit it.
Yeah, wait. How can you leave a faith if everyone believes in a God?
Well, exactly. That's exactly it. They're like precepts will say that you don't actually not believe in God. You've just deceived yourself.
Or you're denying God.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, how do you know? How do you know that I don't believe in? How do you know I believe in God?
Exactly.
How do you know you truly believe in God? How do you know you're not denying it?
And it comes into what they'll do there is we're both accusing each other of being deluded. Because you can't tell the difference between forcing yourself or not knowing that you're in denial and actively denying something that you know is true. There's a difference, and you can't actually tell the difference between unknowing denial or whatever the hell they try to do it. They try to tell you you do believe, but you don't think you do without being insulting, and they can't really do that.
Cricket.
Sorry. I think we beat this one to the ground.
I'd like to add in Alex on this chat if we could.
Alex who? You mean Venomoid?
Yes, Venomoid. Yes.
Okay, one sec.
Please add him.
Okay, there we go.
Alex! Woo! Hey, Alex!
Hey, how's it going?
Protein returns.
Oh, Lord. Let's see. Am I on?
Yes.
Yes, you are on.
All right, cool. Yeah,
you're
so
not.
actually... Oh, okay, I'll leave.
Get out.
Yeah, just to kick you out.
All right. I am actually planning, I hope this will be my next video, on this whole idea that atheists know that God exists. And there's several problems with that. I actually had the good fortune to talk with Dan Courtney, who I know we were trying to invite on to the show before. But anyway, yeah. But this whole idea that atheists know God exists, the first question is, in what sense do atheists know that God exists? And you'll get one of two answers. They'll say, the precept will say, you know that God exists consciously, but you're just too embarrassed to admit it. But if we sat down and had an honest face-to-face discussion, you'd say, oh yeah, of course I know that God exists, but I never admit that to people. You think I'm crazy?
Well, how do you know? Like, the thing is, like, I honestly would say I don't even know what the hell you mean by God. By you just saying, I know God exists. Well, which God? Why would I say... why would I lie about me believing in a God?
Yeah, well...
What motive? What motive would there be?
Agnosticism stating, well, it's a meaningless definition. If you can define it for me in a way I can actually relate to, then we can discuss it.
Yeah, and that's another discussion entirely. The other way that they'll say that I know that God exists is they'll say, well, you know it subconsciously, but you aren't aware of it, which really doesn't make sense, because if, for example, my favorite color is green, as some of you may have guessed from my YouTube channel color layout. But if someone comes up to me and says, oh no, Alex, your favorite color is actually orange, in what sense is that true? After all, not being aware that I know something is the same as not knowing it. So in what sense is my favorite color actually orange? In what sense do I actually know that God exists?
Well, prove to me that your favorite color is green. Prove it.
Well,
the subconscious. If you're with your subconscious, if you're not aware of your subconscious of actions, then the whole point is moot. Then at that point,
pretty much.
Well, it's kind of like saying that we're all gay subconsciously.
Exactly.
Well, biologically speaking, we are.
That makes sense.
I'm so attracted to that guy, but I don't think about it.
Yeah, but I just don't
basically
think
what it comes down to.
You're attracted to him, but you don't know it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just so glad everybody came out and finally said it.
We're all gay subconsciously. Don't worry about it.
Well, we are.
That is a great counterexample. Like that, like when that gets thrown at you, that is the counterexample to throw at them. You just say, well, you know what? You're really gay. You actually just don't acknowledge it, but you really are. You just that is what to throw at them, because they're almost always homophobic. It's like the perfect thing to throw at them.
That'd be great, because if they say that you really believe in God, but you're denying it, so well then you're really gay, but you're just denying it.
Yeah. Right. Prove you're wrong. Prove I'm wrong.
No.
Prove you're wrong.
Stone yourself. If you stone yourself, that proves you're gay.
Well, I mean, you can have sex with all the women you want. You can say that's your proof that you're not gay. But we know deep down that you are.
Right.
Stone yourself.
We know when you close your eyes at night, the first thing that pops into your mind is Justin Bieber. We know it.
Hey, who told you?
Well,
I
hey,
just do. I
speaking
just
of-
know. I just
speaking of
know
a
it's
man-
revealed to me.
Speaking of a man so sexy, he'd turn any guy gay.
Litho did man.
Yeah.
Hello,
Welcome.
Litho did man.
Who?
Hello.
Aaron. Aaron? Crap.
Hello? Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
There he is. Yay.
Well, welcome.
You got anything to add?
He's
Not at this point, but I do have an there's something that's kind of theological.
You're going. Wait, Prag, mute your mic. Stupid static.
What's that?
No, Prag's mic is doing static. Go ahead.
All right. There's actually a theological question that's been bothering me, and I've yet to get a good answer from any fundamentalists on this. So I had a discussion. Is it a good time to bring something like that up? Is that all right?
What is it?
Everything else that came up, I don't see why not.
Okay.
We're all friends here. We're not gonna. If you say you're gay, we're fine with that.
Yeah.
No, actually, unfortunately, I'm not.
If you were, Strife would get the camera out and try to film it, but that's
Nice. Okay, I had a discussion. This was about a month ago. With a person I like and respect very much. Okay, who happens to be a fundamentalist Christian, and they were talking about their. Now, they were telling me the story about their sister who had a Down syndrome girl, right? Their daughter, who she died at like 21, something like that. I think she was 21 years old when she died. And they were talking about how when she died, but they were all Christians and they're going to be reunited in heaven. And she made the what I'm not going to be insensitive to say anything, whatever. I'm not going to be a jackass about that kind of thing. Whatever makes people feel happy about their
It's way for them to cope.
the passing of a loved one, sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
And but she said, and she will be restored in heaven.
I've
And
heard
I was
that
like,
too.
restored? You mean she won't be, she won't have Down syndrome anymore? And she said, no, she'll be restored. She'll be, she'll be like she would have been without Down syndrome.
Well, that means she'll be a completely different person altogether.
Right. Yeah, that means it's not her.
That's what I tried. I was like, so that was my argument, because I'm thinking, okay, I didn't know her sister. I didn't know her sister's child. I didn't know anything about, I've never met these people. But my guess would be that for 21 years, they lived with a child that they loved. Obviously, I'm a parent. We love our children more than ourselves. And you had a child who you loved and cared, who's now taken from you, through medical reasons. So, and that person is waiting for you in heaven, in an afterlife for eternity, but is not the same person that you loved by any definition of the same kind of person. That makes sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I used to work with people who were had traumatic brain injuries, and the other staff and I would sometimes say, what if these people weren't injured? What if they weren't handicapped? What would they be like? And what we resolved was that they would be completely different people. We wouldn't even know them. We might not even get along with them because they would be so different.
Right.
Yep.
Well,
I've
that's-
heard the same argument when I was going to the Pentecostal churches, that if you were, let's say you had a bad limp or your arm was tore off or whatever, when you get to heaven, everything is just restored. And it's like that to me, it didn't make any sense, because then you're not the same person anymore after that.
You're not flesh. That's one thing.
No.
Basically, your existence here on this planet is pretty much useless and
Yeah.
nonsensical.
Well, it seems like it's like, well, God made you a piece of shit. He wants to remake you so you're not a piece of shit. So
What was
pretty
it?
much when he remakes you, you're not you anymore. You're not, because you were the piece of shit.
This is this is kind of boils down to the mind-body issue all over again, is really where this kind of comes down to. What this view that this comes from presupposes mind-body dualism, and so they think that there's a real you, that's the spiritual you, that's somewhere up in some spiritual realm or whatever it is, and that's the real you. And so that's what's behind the body. And so when the brain is damaged, because they have to account now for the brain damaged people being different. If you look up Phineas Gage on like Wikipedia, it was like the case where a guy had a rod shot through his head, and he used to be like he was like a really nice guy, dependable family man, and then after that he became a drunkard. He would swear, was unreliable. He was a completely different human being. And so the question was, well, when Phineas Gage died and he went to heaven or hell, what was he? Was he the old one, or was he the new one? And if he's the old one, and the good Phineas Gage was the real Phineas Gage, and his brain that was damaged was like the brain's like the transmitter for what the real you wants. Was he just watching in horror while the physical version of him, he was telling him to do something good, but he was actually doing something bad?
Well, what's going on there is, see, the old him is the one that goes to hell, even though it was the new him that caused him to go to hell.
I was going to say that he possessed.
The brain damage is repaired before you go to hell, correct?
Okay, then that sounds like he's going to be in two places at once, and I thought only...
Right, then there's two souls, not one, yeah. It's a problem for their theology, but they think there's an ideal you, is basically what it is what they'll come and answer it with, because I've kind of gone through this when I was back in Christian schools, and it's basically, there's what God knows you would be if you were fully restored in the perfect body, because they do believe you get a different body, but you are the same thing. That's where the whole spirit, mind-body dualism comes from. And so you get a new body. That's part of their theology. It comes from the old Judaism stuff.
They say when old people die, they go to heaven, and they're an adult in their prime, in their 20s or 30s. They're not the old person that they died as.
What happens if they like being an old person?
Exactly. I mean, you as you grow and as you age, you
evolve. You have the wisdom that you had.
No, but I'm saying what if you liked it. Like, I'm just saying, like, if you like being a adult instead of looking like a teenager for the rest of eternity.
I like what Technolite said in the chat room. What if you don't like your nose job? What if you go up to heaven? Let's say you had you were born with a real crappy ass nose, and you get to heaven.
Nope.
Oh no, they say you get a perfect body.
You nose job back? I don't want that back.
Wait, does that mean every woman has a huge rack?
Sex change.
Every woman has a huge rack?
Maybe that's why they call it heaven.
Yeah.
What about the women who've had breast reduction surgeries? They don't want all that extra mass there. They're gonna want it gone.
They're gonna go to hell because guys do not like small tits.
They're gonna have trouble
that should be a commandment.
You know?
Thou shalt have small tits. Go to hell.
Hey, as long as they've got them, I like them.
Well, what if they wanted this? Some women and dudes prefer the smaller one. Whatever.
Hey,
I mean, the whole thing is that it's not supposed to matter. Whatever you get in heaven, you're supposed to be happy, which annihilates any version of free will that you would have had in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And who wants to sit around kissing God's ass all from now?
What meaning is exactly?
It's boring, doesn't it?
Like one of my favorite activities, you're not even allowed to do unless you're trying to procreate. So does that mean we can't have sex up there?
Hey, yeah. Does that mean that heaven's already packed?
What's the point of heaven if I can't freaking pop a load up?
Or you're just going to be happy. You're the ultimate meaning and purpose. This was one of the videos I did was meaning and purpose.
I wouldn't be happy if I couldn't get.
So basically, you're saying that we're all going to be mentally ill.
Well, the biggest issue I find,
we're going to praise and glorify God, and that is the ultimate good in the universe. And by doing it, we will be happy beyond anything we know here on this earth.
It
So
sounds like
nothing
hell.
else
basically,
matters.
you're going to be mentally ill because that is a mental illness.
Well, you're going to be a different person. That's the idea. Is that
Yeah.
you're going to be remade so that having sex and getting drunk isn't happy. Because that's not how the
Then
ideal
why did
person
God
should
give me
behave.
a penis?
Well, I don't get drunk.
Well, I
but
could-
All
God,
that
not
aside,
be-
the
that
biggest
needs to be an
issue.
episode title.
I don't want to look like Ken when I get. If I were to go to heaven, I wouldn't want to look like Ken. Hell, I'd be missing all my junk.
The biggest issue with heaven is its eternity. Because regardless of all this happiness and stuff, if it's never going to end, you ask, well, what's the point? Because
Eternity
you
would be
value
hell.
things really because they end. A thing actually gains its value after it's over or once you get an
Exactly.
idea of what its end is like. And
Exactly.
so it's pointless in the long run. How could you be happy?
Yeah,
Because
no,
there's nothing to reference it
and,
to.
and
They've
also,
defined happiness as doing that.
That would
heaven
actually
would-
be,
heaven in
would
itself would-
actually be very, what's the word,
boring.
valued.
Oh.
You'd
It
want
wouldn't be. No, yeah, you're right. It wouldn't be
to
valued
into
because it'd be
existence
boring.
there.
You only value things that are things that have value are things that they're either there for a small amount of time
Or they're fleeting.
or they're fleeting. Yes, because if you're in heaven forever, I mean, and nothing changes, that would be boring. That would be hell because then you would have to be you wouldn't be able to stand it. You'd go fucking nutball.
You know what I think would be the most valuable thing in heaven is? Booze,
Death?
demons, and if the devil's there, that is like, if you could get the devil there, that's like fucking crack, I'm guessing. Because like it'd be so rare. It'd be like I'm guessing it's like jail. Like, how do you sneak snuff into heaven? Like,
Yeah.
that'd be.
Well, you know what they say. There is no
Sorry,
beer in
bend
heaven.
over. I got a rubber glove.
Yeah, no, wait. Who's supposed to meet you at the pearly gates? Forget who it was.
That's
Peter.
St. Peter.
Yeah, like I bet like you shove something up your ass, like, oh, hey, St. Peter, you walk in.
Hey, no, if I'm
It's
gonna have
right.
anything
Why are you
snuck-
looking to the left?
if I'm not gonna have anything snuck into heaven, I'm gonna have Eric Cartman do it because he can shove in a whole amusement park in his ass.
Yeah, no shit.
Wow.
I'm bringing
You know-
hookers. That's all I know.
I'm actually not a huge fan of these what would heaven be like arguments because at the end of the day, the religious person can say, look, I believe in fucking magic. It doesn't matter how it works.
Yes.
Exactly.
So it's like, I can just say, look, however God does it, it's not going to get boring. It's going to be infinitely
It's
happy.
just- yeah.
Bibbidi bobbidi boop. Pretty much.
That's
Pretty much.
pretty much it.
That's why I point out if you're infinitely happy, then what's the point?
That's
Because
the
what if
the
I'm
answer.
not happy being infinite?
The answer there is that you just say, well, okay, you can say, like what Alex said, is, okay, you're defining happiness. Then what the hell's the point? Why are you even talking about value and meaning and happiness? Because it's not going to be like anything that we have now. You're just saying it's going to be good.
Well, why even define me? What does this have to
wait.
do with me then? Because
Wait.
obviously the way you're defining heaven describes something that's not me in heaven.
Right.
And that's
So-
a good point.
Wait, also,
That's
if you say that what you'll experience in heaven is like this way, put back in the damn freezer. Shut up! You
Really?
shut up!
Interesting.
Shut up!
These things happen.
I didn't do
Get
that.
a sex change.
I didn't do that. Now get the fuck out. Get the fuck out.
Or he's going to hell. I don't know.
That's what hell
I
is.
think the rubber glove's coming out. That's all I know.
The devil showed up with a handbasket. He's like, "It's your turn."
Yeah, I think we're losing people to hell already. That was quick.
Let's ask Strife what hell's like when he gets back.
If he gets back.
As I was gonna say, like, if you don't know what good, like, what is happiness now, because it seems like you're saying, well, it's not gonna be anything that you experience later. So how do you know what happiness is now if it's not gonna be what you experience in heaven? You don't, do you?
Then the whole concept of happiness is
Like, I don't know what happiness is then if I don't go to heaven. So what the fuck is happiness?
Yeah, and if God is supposedly defining your happiness, then anything any thought or feeling that you would have had or should have is completely
Yes.
that's concept.
Invalid. Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes your whole
I
makes
feel
the whole
happy.
concept valid.
Like, I feel happy when I have sex, but then if God says sex is bad, then am I happy or not?
I don't know. That's a good question.
It's bad happiness.
I think it's
Good happiness
interesting
and bad happiness.
how the Bible talks more about hell than it does about heaven. it talks a lot about how to get into heaven, but it talks almost nothing about
the
heaven
topic
itself.
that Jesus spoke about most in the
A lot
Bible.
of clouds, a lot of cherubs, a lot of tall buildings. Might have been clouds, might have been apartment buildings. You weren't really sure.
That's why I say that the whole thing of the New Testament being and Jesus being the good God or the hippie happy go love guy, it's a bunch of bullshit. The thing he spoke about most in the New Testament is hell.
Right. And basically they used hell as a way just to keep people under control anyway.
Well, right. I mean, you basically, if you're going to accept the concept of hell, you have to accept that your omnipotent, omniscient, holy, good God is totally okay with torturing somebody for eternity so that some people can go to heaven. You have to sign up for that.
Why even create them if they're going to go to hell? I mean, honestly.
Because the argument goes that they were necessary to get the good people.
So
and that's where you go.
What's the point?
Then that makes God a monster if he already knows that if he creates us just to go to hell just to save a few other ones.
Who are you to judge God?
Well, not necessarily, guys, because if you really truly love God, then hell's not that bad because you can basically bask in the glory of knowing that your suffering in hell is making him happy.
Heck, wait. How could hell be bad, though? I'm curious. If you torture forever...
Actually, hell couldn't even be bad because, and here's the reason why. Because if we have a soul, let's say we had a soul, okay, and souls are not dependent on our physical bodies, and our physical bodies have nerves and connectors right there. And if we're in hell and there's no nerves or connectors, then the concept of being tortured for eternity is a completely moot point because we're not going to feel it anyway.
Well, even if you take away pain, you got to add in the idea of loss. You're not losing anything because everything seems pretty much useless in the first place in hell.
Right.
So
they'll define
there's no loss.
They'll define hell as eternal isolation. So they basically, especially if you look at Craig or a bunch of other apologists, when they get forced onto the topic, they'll basically define it to say hellfire is not actually biblical. It's eternal separation from God. So it's like eternal, solitary confinement.
So wait, how do you know
I'm
God
still
is
basking
there?
in the glory of knowing this eternal separation is making God happy somewhere.
But then God's watching you. So
Yeah,
then you're not separated, are you?
You're supposedly separated from him and whatever. It basically, instead of becoming physical torture of being burned alive constantly, is eternal mental torture. It doesn't make it any better. You can't whitewash torture. There's no.
Yeah, but you get eventually you get used to it.
Yeah, you would.
Like
I create my own God, and then I have that God.
You would go insane. You would lose all semblance of sanity if you leave somebody in a solitary confinement for long enough, and you do sensory deprivation, which is what they say it's supposed to be. Because it's eternal darkness or whatever it is. If there's sensory deprivation and solitary confinement, you go nuts.
But the thing is, though, there's a lot of people there, right? It's not just you.
Oh, that's the thing. You're not supposed to have contact with other people either, because then that you could possibly have fun.
Yeah, but they say there's so many people. I mean, I'm just curious. Like, one, who's going to do the torture? So if there's someone doing the torture, you have somebody.
No, it's just you're in a lake of fire. That's it.
So why can't I just talk to the guy
Alex's
next to me?
point from before, it's fucking magic. You can't argue against.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to say again, which is, look, if God wants you to torture, he can make it torturous. He can make it so that you don't just get used to it, even if you have no nerves, etc. It's all magic. So arguing the mechanics really doesn't do much.
Right. Hey, I'm building a really big house in my head when I'm in hell. Brick by brick, really carefully. Apparently, that's a method some people use when they're in torture, usually solitary confinement. They build their future house slowly, brick by brick, and that's what keeps them sane. I thought that was actually an interesting concept. But yeah,
actually, I've heard of this concept. It was actually put on a TV show many years ago. But yeah, if you're using your mind to keep yourself
sane,
sane, yeah. So like what some women do when they're being raped, they will actually kind of like set their mind, like they're like they put themselves mentally in another place, and so this way they're not experiencing the rape. They are actually their body is they're being separated from that. So, but in their mind, they're not part of what's actually happening.
It's a mental technique. I've heard it described as some kind of a mental technique that some people can do. It's like your mind is shutting itself down at that point. You're going into shock.
Right.
Like that's what like when people don't scream when like their hands are cut off, they go into shock. So like
but if
your
God
mind
changes
shuts
when
down.
you go to heaven, He can change you when you go to hell, and then it just won't matter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like Alex said, it's fucking magic. You can't argue against it.
Right.
Yeah, arguing the mechanics of it just isn't going to work.
You have to argue against the concept. That got me out, and that's why I think it's valuable.
What about God being
Present. Everywhere, all the time.
You generally won't hear that argued anymore, or at least I haven't heard an apologist really sign up to do it.
Because it's pantheistic?
Or they say if he's outside of space and time, then he
I was nailed down with the one question: if they to prove that their God is not omnipresent, I said, is he ever God in hell? And they'll say no, that your God is not omnipresent because he can't. If he's not ever in hell and anywhere else at the same time, he can't be there. Then he's not omnipresent.
By definition, he has to be in all possible worlds. Does that include hell? Does all possible worlds include hell?
Don't even. I wouldn't even go that far with him. Just say just ask him simple, plain, straight. Is God ever in hell? Is God in hell?
Well, technically,
and they'll say most emphatically, most of them will say no.
No, yeah.
But didn't Jesus go to hell?
There's no biblical thing for omnipresence. It was basically like you say, God can be everywhere, but that's more of they'll try to define that away as an omniscience thing. So they say if you were there, then God knows what's going on there, and that if you were anywhere, God can be with you. So they can interpret their way out of the verses that were used to try and say that omnipresence was a thing.
What about all-knowing?
Oh, omniscience. They'll sign up for that.
Wait. But here's this: if God knows everything, He knows how to sin without sinning.
There's the subjective.
He knows how to have sex without sinning.
No, he knows how to give the perfect blowjob.
Yes, exactly. We were talking about that the other day.
Yeah, it's a perfect thing. Just say that. God knows how to give the perfect blowjob.
The more serious argument against that is the fact that, well, if you define knowledge by what it is, what do we use it for? What does it do? Knowledge does one of two things. It gains knowledge. You use knowledge to gain more knowledge, and it accomplishes things. So if you know everything, then there's no problem to solve and no more knowledge to gain. Therefore, you know nothing.
Well, I just gave you a problem. You want to have the perfect blowjob. Therefore, God knows it.
If there is actually an argument against that, like I wouldn't actually use that argument because Craig actually has a pretty long fucking thing, and so because there's a whole bunch of issues that come from omniscience just by itself that there are contradictions you can kind of derive from that, and so they'll define knowledge as God has omniscience in terms of propositional knowledge, in terms of if you could form supposedly any knowledge statement in terms of a proposition, and God would know the true or false value of any proposition. It gets really fucking complex.
So wait, God can't do everything? He only say something's true or false?
Well, that's not omniscience. That's infallibility.
You're right.
Well, no, he knows anything that would. So, like, they would argue that knowing how to give the perfect blowjob is not a kind of knowledge in that respect, or it's not the basically knowledge of what it's like to sin. Yeah,
well, the problem with
what it's like to be gay.
The biggest issue with those statements, the sin that's not a sin, all that stuff, they're contradictions. They're impossible. So exactly. That actually doesn't. No, that doesn't actually. That's not a good valid point. They're meaningless statements. So you're not arguing anything. You're saying God is wrong because of jumble. But jumble is a meaningless word. So I didn't make any point. Until I define jumble as something meaningful, it's not even valid in any logical explanation. So
neither it's God.
Well, of course.
Well, that's assuming your conclusion.
I mean, that's how I fight contradiction. I use another contradiction. I mean, it shows how stupid it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's if you go into the whole theology crap, like, you will see, I mean, there's so much ink spilled over all this kind of thing, and just to deal with problems along these lines, it's ridiculous. And that's why you hear people say, "Oh, you're not refuting any serious theologians," because they just will. It'll make your head spin if you try to read this shit.
Why would you say that?
Well, it does make. It actually won't make your head spin. I think it'll make your head hurt.
It'll make your head hurt. Well, they'll talk about things, and like when you say, how could, like, the incarnation of Jesus, how could he be fully man and fully God, 100% man and 100% God? Go Google that shit and read the Catholic Encyclopedia entry on that, And fucking my head spins. I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about? They will just define the most complex
100%.
state of being or whatever it is, and it's this really weird metaphysical thing that they define.
They
they
define
say he's that.
accents and crap like that. The biggest issue when you talk to an actual apologist, when I used to study it, and I kind of make fun of it now, is what they'll try to do is use incredibly hard and complex words to confuse you. I know it sounds like, oh, I'm presuming this, but it's honestly true, because I've actually taken some statements they'll make and, actually word them in plain English, and the actual statement's something obvious.
Yes.
It's like, why did you use these huge words? Why? And I think on the internet it's known as Chewbacca arguments. Basically, you're scaring the opponent. Yeah, Han Solo always said, oh, you know what, Chewbacca, you're right, because Chewbacca's like, I'm going to kick your ass. Oh, you're right. I'm scared. You win. And to me,
let the Wookiee win.
In a sense, because when I left the church, it was because I was going into apologetics, and I started learning this crap. And it finally hit me. This is bull. And it's not even honest. And no offense to an apologist out there, while I do respect the fact that they are studying hard, the ones that I know, they actually study hard. What they're studying is not honest. It's just
how to deceive.
Nonsense.
No, wait,
Yeah.
wait. To me, it seems like they're studying actually no knowledge. They're just making up shit.
Exactly.
No, they're studying how to deceive people.
They're not necessarily. So when you distill, like, say, the cosmological or the moral argument or whatever these things down, what it'll come down to is well, you can't prove me wrong. Like that neo-Lorentzian view we talked about, God, it was a while ago. Like, you can't prove it wrong. So it technically could be true.
But you can't
and
prove
you'll have
right.
to admit that it could technically possibly be true. So while you have all this evidence, I have divine revelation from God that says that it really is this way. And you're never going to trump that.
I noticed a lot of times when you debate, like, apologists or people that claim to be, they like to categorize things a lot. So when you try to explain your position, they'll immediately ask you a question. Oh, so you're talking about the epistemology of something, 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 and you'll stop for a second and you're like,
up for it, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what am I signing up for? What can I read the contract first? Oh, we don't have time for that. So answer my question. Are you talking about this thing? I don't know. Oh, so you don't know. Why are you talking about this? Why are you arguing this? You obviously don't know that much. Have you actually read into this? Before you get back to me, I need you to read these 3 books. Now, they're 2,050 pages long, but don't worry. I'll be here when you finish them.
Right.
It's like, okay.
I had a very similar experience. I was debating somebody on Twitter, and they were like, well, really, I'd like to send you an email. I'd like to send you an email, and I normally don't do that. I'm like, no. Anything we can say right here, 140 characters, even if we have to do it 100 times, this is where we're doing it. And he's like, no, really, send me an email. So I sent him an email. He writes back this 7-page long email, complete with links to videos, all these articles. I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? It'll take me like 3 weeks to get through this crap.
Right.
Hey, that's 3 weeks we can put our guard down.
Yeah, so I deleted it. I was like, fuck off, dude.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to argue with them, I mean, if you see a lot of things that get put up, my favorite thing that I think I want to do if I ever get into like an actual full debate is you do the same thing right back at them. They can state an argument in 5 minutes that'll take you an hour to refute, and you basically, I think that the way to do it is you throw it right back at them. I call it the moral argument against Yahweh. You say you point to the verses in the Bible where it says you can own slaves from other nations and you can treat them as your property that don't go away. And you quote the things for the Amalekite genocide where he says that you shall kill all the women and children and babies, and say it does that. And you point out hell is eternal conscious torture, and God knew that people were going to go to hell when he creates them. So you don't make them a Christian apologist. You make them a slavery apologist, a genocide apologist, and a torture apologist. Well, and you just put their fucking ass to that fire. You hold them to it.
Remember, Craig said that the babies were getting their salvation.
Oh yeah, they were going to heaven. But he's against abortion. But he's against abortion. We could send every future baby to heaven by aborting every possible baby and then just killing ourselves. That's it.
Well, remember, as long as God didn't order it and God didn't do it, it's wrong.
Wait, do you age in heaven?
Having your miscarriage obviously was perfectly fine because God did that.
Unless a Republican is involved, in which case that they'll make sure that if you have a miscarriage, that you're charged with a crime.
Anyone notice that? Correlation.
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole your babies die, go to heaven thing, they need that because babies die. And people wonder, if you follow the doctrine of original sin, babies that die, or people who are born with mental disabilities, who can't comprehend the concept of Jesus dying for their sins,
They go to hell.
do they go to heaven? Do they go to hell? Like,
They go to heaven because remember, it's ingrained in all our hearts. We knew it from the start.
But they got natural sin.
Right, and I actually had my 8th grade teacher break down and crying, talking about his one cousin who was that way, and he goes, you know what? He has to be in heaven. And they pull some verses out of their ass about how if you can't comprehend the fact that God will put you in heaven anyway, which is really a bad interpretation of those verses, is not valid at all, but they cling to it because it's a huge problem. If you look at their normal theology, and you say, well, what happened when my infant died? Did my infant just go to hell?
Make purgatory?
Man,
I believe that is.
Yeah, because it makes sense. Because well, babies go to purgatory. They don't go to hell or heaven. They go to purgatory.
Well, everybody goes to purgatory.
Didn't they just do away with purgatory?
Yeah,
everybody goes to purgatory. It's the idea of being cleansed to go into heaven. What you guys are thinking of is, you guys are thinking of limbo. Because limbo is the place that babies go to. Purgatory is the place that Catholics believe you still have sinful retribution to make. And so you're still sinful. And while you're in purgatory, you're being purged of that sin, so you are ready in that perfect state to go into heaven.
Right.
But you go to hell hell is for demons and people who are excommunicated or commit the blasphemy sin. Or the
and lawyers.
And Palpatine.
Yep. Uh-oh.
So are apologists technically lawyers?
They go to hell.
Oh, kind.
They're workers for the devil.
All right. I might have to get going.
Yeah, I'm afraid I have to get going too. I actually have to be up very early in the morning, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just got a text from my wife. She's upstairs with the baby, and she's just like...
She's saying, get up here now!
Something
well, if all the cool people are leaving, I gotta go.
How about we wrap up then?
Okay, sounds good.
Let's go with the last person who came in. Litho did man. You still there?
Yep, I'm still here.
You wanna make a closing statement?
I don't have any particular closing statements.
Well, pull something out of your ass then.
Oh, that's not a good.
Let's get the cameras rolling. I don't want static pictures.
No, I've got nothing to say actually. So
live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Yes.
Eat
How about
babies.
that?
I don't know. Okay.
And eat lots of babies.
Yeah.
They're delicious,
Get some
babies
steak
are
sauce.
delicious.
That's right.
I think Joe was second to last.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah.
Or was it Alex? Alex or Joe?
I think Alex came in after me.
Okay, Alex.
Closing statements. The topic was apologetics, off and on.
Pretty consistent, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, not that consistent, but pretty consistent.
Well, I think we did touch upon the idea that apologetics usually aren't meant to convince people; they're meant to reinforce. So I think we can all agree on that for the most part.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and usually they do have... The key thing I think we all need to remember is defining your terms, because people can talk past each other, or a term will simply be defined in a way that makes no sense, but unless you ask, it seems to flow with the argument. So those are two things I think just really do need to be reinforced when talking about apologetics.
Okay, Joe?
Wow.
Yeah, I think the apologetics arguments are interesting to read about, but they are not evidence-based. They're all philosophy, and I think it's interesting that they equate certain terms like possibility and existence. Like, if it's possible, then it exists. Wait, what? There's a disconnect there that I can't wrap my mind around. I'm just like blown away by that. But yeah, it is definitely interesting to read about these things, and that's all I gotta say.
Okay, was Prague or Chris? I think Prague. Yeah, Prague.
Going on to them, remember, use their own virtues against them, humility and fortitude. Be humble. Tell them, hey, can you dumb it down for me? I'm not quite sure what you're talking about there. Hey, can you explain that to me? And be fortitude. If they say, well, read this, say, no. I actually, I'm willing to stay here and let you be the one to present your point, to represent that. if you continue doing this, we can have this discussion. Because no, I'm not going to leave yet. I think we need to get this done today and do this. Use those virtues against them, and eventually they're going to do one of two things. They're going to get really angry, or they're going to look really stupid. So you won't look stupid.
Okay.
That's a great point. I've often done that. Like you just ask them to explain it.
Okay, Chris. Did we lose him?
I don't know. Chris.
Chris.
Hello, Chris.
Chris.
Yes.
Chris.
Hey, it's Chris.
God damn it, Chris! You missed your ending.
I think if all these people who made all this crap up, I think if they put their mind to actually something that could better society, I think we'd be better off.
Okay. Now it's Packard.
I think if we waste too much time trying to prove that they're stupid, I think we need to start putting more effort into proving why we're actually here instead of trying to make shit up.
Word.
That's a good one.
Okay, Packard.
Watch their hands. Because they'll never show you their full card, and it's like every other magic act. And they'll never show the full card because they know if they do, they'll be proven a fraud that they are.
Okay, counter.
Alex said the main things. Make them have their definitions straight. Now, even simple phrases, they will redefine them to be something very, very specific. So make sure you get that straightened out. The philosophy part of it, I think, is a good point. But there are parts where they will try they'll try to misuse science, like in the cosmological argument or the design argument, and just pointing out, getting somebody who knows the science and pointing out where they're misrepresenting things, I think, is really important. Because that's where they're going to go from now on, because that's what convinces people. That's the argument they want to make.
To note what Packard said, look at Craig's fingers. That's something that has to be exposed. His freaking fingers. And that's all I got to say about that, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah, but this is the Lion Ghost Show, and signing off.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Don't forget to check out Packard Pokes at Friday nights, 9 p.m.
Oh yeah, and by the way, check that out. Sorry.
Excellent show.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, oh yeah, by the way, Packard Pokes is every Friday when?
Friday night, 9 o'clock, right here at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time at blogtv.com/people/Packard Pokes at.
That's 10
Isn't
p.m.
this an
Eastern
anniversary
Standard
or
Time.
something?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, this Friday, that's coming up on the 15th, is my 100th episode.
Woohoo! Crap.
What standard time zone?
It's 10 o'clock Eastern.
10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Central, and
7 o'clock
8 o'clock
California.
7 o'clock Mountain.
Yeah.